across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good afternoon. This is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. Manchester, indeed the country, is picking up the pieces after the horrendous terror attack yesterday. We will talk about this from all angles, from the anti-Semitism angle, from the human angle, from the political angle. Certainly we'll be talking as well about Israel. They have condemned Keir Starmer. Also, as we've been hearing in the news as well, Donald Trump has said that Hamas has only until Sunday to make its mind up about the deal in Gaza, and how could that actually affect things here as well, particularly when there are lots of protests planned. We saw some really shameful behaviour last night in many places. There were people protesting, choosing last night, the day when 2 Jewish people died, to make their point about Gaza, choosing very, very big venues, and in many cases saying nakedly anti-Semitic things, almost dancing on the graves of those people. Absolutely horrendous, shocking and dreadful. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about it from the policing angle today as well. Peter Blexley is standing by because, of course, it was that dreadful, dreadful incident where a firearms officer mistakenly shot an innocent civilian as well as shooting the terrorist. We'll talk to Peter Blexley about that. We had a very good caller, Chris, yesterday, as a former firearms officer. We're going to see if we can get him back on the line as well today to give his perspective on all of this. Many politicians, of course, talking about all of this, and in Manchester today, Andy Burnham has been there. The Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy has been there too. I want your reaction to this. It's now more than 24 hours on from this attack. Where are we as a country? What do we do this weekend? How do we support our Jewish friends and neighbours? And how do we pick up the pieces and attempt to move on from this? Let me know your thoughts on all of this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp voice note 0344 499 1000. You can send me a WhatsApp text message on that number as well, or give me a ring. I can see the phones going already. We'll get as many people as possible on the air between now and 7 o'clock. Our country has been attacked. Our friends and neighbours in the Jewish community have been attacked as well, and we want to make sure that we stand by them. The attacker's family, himself, the terrorist family, let's not call him an attacker, let's call him a terrorist, because that's what he was. His family say they are shocked and saddened by this. There were no warnings. He wasn't referred to Prevent, for example, the anti-terrorist programme that monitors various people. We'll get into all of that today, and we'll hear what the politicians have been saying. And let me know your thoughts as well. As I say, 0344 499 1000. Let's get started here on Talk. Well, it is Talk Drive. I'm here right through till 7 o'clock, and I hope I can have your company until then, and indeed tomorrow between 10 and 12:30, and Sunday between 10 and 1. I just want to reflect on what various politicians have been saying today. Nigel Farage, firstly, the leader of Reform UK, he has said that the weekend marches, the anti-Israeli and certainly pro-Palestinian marches, they need to be stopped in his view. What do you think about this? Just listen to this clip and then let me know what you think. This is what Nigel Farage has been saying.
There is a big, big march planned in London this Saturday, and I think the only way we can describe it is a hate march. Whether the Home Secretary and the police decide they've got the powers to stop it, I don't know. What is for certain is we're a country that allows peaceful protest, but we're not a country that allows the celebration of murder or slogans in our street that are deeply, deeply insightful. I must admit, saying this now to you today, I feel more worried about the state of broken Britain than I ever have before.
Nigel Farage there, the leader of Reform UK, saying he is more worried about the state of broken Britain. How worried are you about the state of broken Britain? I know I am. I feel embarrassed, I feel ashamed to live in a country where people felt they could go out last night and essentially celebrate the deaths of 2 completely innocent people who were killed, targeted by a terrorist, simply because they were Jewish. Absolutely horrendous. Really, really dreadful. Let's hear from the Home Secretary now, Shabana Mahmood. She talked about the attack.
I am horrified by the anti-Semitic terrorist attack at a synagogue on the holiest day in the Jewish calendar. My prayers are with the victims and the families of all of those who are murdered here today. I want to thank the police and all of the emergency services for the speed of their response and also for their considerable bravery. The government has stepped up security at synagogues across the whole of the country, and we will do whatever is required to keep our Jewish community safe. I know that there are many questions that are still to be answered, and rest assured they will be answered as quickly as possible.
Shabana Mahmood there, the Home Secretary. Well, she was on our sister station Times Radio this morning and talked about this as well. She particularly discussed the protests after the synagogue terror attack. This is what she said to Times Radio this morning.
We have the right to peaceful protest in this country.
It wasn't peaceful, was it? There were arrests for attacking police.
Yes, and I was just about to say, but anybody who engages in a protest and breaks the law of our land will face the full force of the law. They will be arrested, and I would expect after arrest for the Crown Prosecution Service to do their job as well. I would have wanted to see actually those organisations that are behind these protests to show a little sensitivity and to call off those protests. I think that the behaviour that we've seen last night is fundamentally un-British. I think it's disgraceful, and I would call on everybody who is considering protest in the next day or two to just take a step back and to show some humanity and some love towards a community that is grieving. I think that is the right thing to do. People can get on with their protest. Those issues, unfortunately, are not likely to come to an end in the next day or two. No, the attacker was not known to the security services. We know that he is a British national of Syrian descent. He came to this country as a young child and was naturalised as a British citizen when he was still a minor, but beyond that, there isn't any other information I can share, but he was not known to the to counter-terror police. What I would say is it is really imperative that we all stand together, united as a country, and do not allow things that are happening abroad to fuel tensions here at home. It is really important that we're able to reach out to people that belong to different communities and show that spirit of love and solidarity, because we are British citizens first and foremost.
Very interesting to hear Shabana Mahmood talk about those protests as being un-British. She said it was un-British to do that. I wonder what Peter Blexley thinks, the former Metropolitan Police detective, our crime commentator here on Talk. Peter, good afternoon. What do you make of what Shabana Mahmood said there? She said, show a little sensitivity. I think people should show a heck of a lot more sensitivity, much more than a little, and call off these protests on a matter of taste and decency. I'm not talking about the right to protest. I'm talking about taste and decency and reading the room, which these protesters resolutely fail to do.
Well, I'm coming at it from a slightly different stance, which is not about taste and decency. It's about the operational demands that will now be placed on our police the length and breadth of the country. Clearly, additional security is going to have to be provided to synagogues, Jewish places of worship, and I would suspect, as more information about the terrorist who is now dead, Jihad al-Shami, comes forward, it may be that it is deemed necessary to put additional security measures around mosques, for example. Not, of course, because the Jewish population has a reputation for violence. They don't. In fact, if you go online and put into your search engine terrorist attack committed by a Jewish man in Northern Europe, you won't get any responses, because that's not what the Jewish people do. But there might be some people who are hugely irritated, for example, by this outrage and might idiotically feel compelled to go and damage a mosque, for example. I sincerely hope not. So that's why this march, this protest tomorrow, should not take place. It's also in support of Palestine Action, a proscribed terrorist group, another reason why it shouldn't happen. But as last night showed us, there are some ghastly people out there who probably will not listen.
I mean, just so many railway stations as well. Liverpool Lime Street, Manchester Piccadilly, Liverpool Street Station in London, Edinburgh, Waverley, Cardiff Central, Sheffield Railway Station, Farnborough Station in Hampshire as well. These people just have absolutely no sense of decency by choosing last night in order to do these protests. I just wonder if you could tell me a little bit more about what we know about the suspect himself, because of course it's unclear so far if he is the same person who sent death threats to an MP a number of years ago.
Yes, that's not certain, but what we do know is Jihad al-Shami came to the UK apparently when he was aged about 6, and consequently became a naturalised British citizen and has lived in the northwest of the country for most of that time, so I'm told. Not somebody that the counter-terrorism police were aware of, that they had on their radar, never subject to the PREVENT programme, for example. But somehow, what is absolutely clear is that he has been radicalised into committing a murderous act of terrorism yesterday. I'm sure we will find out in the not-too-distant future how that came about. Counter-terror police will have seized any devices that they think he may have had access to, phones, laptops, iPads, all that kind of stuff, and the history of those will be thoroughly debriefed in order that they can see how was he radicalised, where was he radicalised, by whom, and what inspired this appalling atrocity.
Tell us about the firearms officer as well, who we think there was a tragic accident where he shot an innocent person. Tell us about that and what the police will be doing now in terms of working out exactly what happened, why it happened, and what happens to that officer.
Yes, I've had the gun oil under my fingernails because I was an authorised firearms officer, albeit many years ago. So I went through the training, much of which has changed and got better. But I've been in situations where you have to make absolute split-second life or death decisions, and then you've got to pull the trigger. You really barely have the time to think about it. It's instantaneous. Matters are panning out in front of you in real time, and decisions often are quite literally split second. We have heard, of course, that unfortunately 2 of the Jewish worshippers were hit by bullets from that gun. I suspect, and this again will be subject to independent Office of Police Conduct investigation, and we will find out, but I would suspect that this is probably an unintended and very unfortunate consequence of armed officers endeavouring to take out Jihad al-Shami.
Yeah. Peter, as always, thank you. That's Peter Blexley there, former Metropolitan Police detective and our crime commentator here at Talk. Chris gave us a ring yesterday from Manchester. He's a retired firearms officer himself. Chris, it's good to talk to you again today, but it's very sad, of course, that we have that news. What do you make of the information we now have today, and what are your thoughts towards that officer who made that tragic mistake?
Yeah, good afternoon, Peter. Good afternoon.
Hi, Chris.
Viewers. Yeah, it's a very, very unfortunate, tragic situation that's arisen. Obviously, I wasn't aware that the circumstances relating to the unintended victims, that the guys who were actually inside the synagogue when the officer discharged his weapon. It's very difficult to speculate on the exact circumstances, but...
Just tell us, maybe not get into the exact circumstances, because we just don't know. What we do know is that a mistake was made. How difficult is it? We've heard from Peter Blexley there, he was a firearms officer, so were you. I mean, how difficult is it in those kind of situations? You have a heck of a lot of training, but in the end, the judgment is split second, as Peter says.
That he may have been given, and obviously any kind of dynamic risk assessment that he conducts when he arrives, and obviously all that has to be done in a matter of a very, very few seconds. Now, obviously, the officer is under an obligation that whatever he does can and will be scrutinised afterwards. and it's the officer himself who has to justify what he did and why he did it.
Yes.
I don't think it's particularly helpful for us to speculate on the exact circumstances.
No, but let's talk generally in that, Chris. I mean, that person's life, his family's life, is going to change dramatically now.
Absolutely. I mean, he will be, as I mentioned yesterday, he'll be. It's a standard practice. He will be removed from firearms duties immediately, and he will probably be removed for any kind of public-facing duties. He will be given a considerable amount of support by the force and by his colleagues, and
is it possible? Again, we don't know the exact circumstances, but is it possible that he could face criminal charges?
It's always possible because there will be a mandatory referral. Whatever had there been, as I mentioned yesterday, as soon as an officer discharges a weapon,
yes,
if there's a mandatory referral to the IOPC, whatever the outcome, whatever the circumstance. So the actual mechanisms as to what follows doesn't alter, notwithstanding the very, very tragic consequences of his or her alleged actions.
Okay.
So it will go to the IOP. Obviously, there'll have to be an inquest on both the
deaths, terrorist death on the innocent man's,
and the innocent victim.
Sure.
They will open up first. They will then be. Those will be adjourned until such time as the various investigations are conducted in relation to the officer, and that will be carried out by the IOPC, who, on completion of their inquiries, will make recommendations potentially to the Constitution Service or the DPP as to whether or not it's appropriate for that any kind of criminal charges are appropriate. And then on top of that, the officer potentially faces misconduct allegations. So it's
going to be a long road for that person, and of course, I mean, the huge sympathies, of course, to the family of that victim as well, and it just illustrates how the battle against terrorism is a really, really tricky one in so many ways. Chris, I really appreciate you coming on again today and illuminating that for us. I appreciate your call yesterday as well. Thanks for coming back on. Anna is in Horsham. She's given me a ring as well, 0344 499 1000. Anna, what are your thoughts today?
It's more of a reminder, hopefully, to Keir Starmer or whoever else is listening. I just heard the speech that you played from Nigel Farage.
Yeah.
I just wanted to remind Sir Keir Starmer that on Sunday is the National Memorial at 2 p.m. in Trafalgar Square to remember the dead on October the 7th. I have a funny feeling, only because I'm a little bit connected, that we're going to be getting a lot more people because of what happened in Manchester. And I just hope he has the brains to police this properly, because if they're already marching on Saturday, they'll likely come out again on Sunday.
I think that's a very fair point, Anna, and certainly there will be many ways in which people can remember the 7th of October. Of course, that's Tuesday. It's hard to believe it's 2 years on, but honestly, what has happened in the last day, it's been horrific, it's been dreadful, it's been awful. But to me anyway, Anna, it wasn't a shock. What about you?
No, I mean, I was in synagogue all day yesterday anyway, and then part of my rabbi's sermon, unfortunately, added the deaths from yesterday. And to me, it was of absolutely no surprise at all. And I had a funny feeling something yesterday would have kicked off somehow. And I just hope, with thousands of people at Trafalgar Square at 2 p.m. on Sunday, isn't going to cause something 10 times worse.
Well, listen, I think it will the security will be very high there. Are you going yourself to Trafalgar Square?
I am going to go. It's the first time I've been, because I live on the south coast. But this year I'm going. Yeah.
Do you know what, Anna? I'm going to go too. So if you see me, say hello, all right?
Excellent. Will do.
All right. Thanks,
Thank
Anna.
you, Peter.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm off air on Sunday at 1 o'clock, and I can just go after that and maybe bring a few friends as well if they want to come too. Maybe if you're in the London area, you'll come as well. And if you see me, say hello. We're going to talk to the Chief Executive of the Anti-Semitism Policy Trust in just a second, a guy called Danny Stone, and take more of your calls and thoughts. Carol in Shoreham-on-Sea says apparently marches can be stopped, but not stationary gatherings. Police want them stopped. The Home Secretary claims she cannot stop them. For heaven's sake, she is the Home Secretary, so she shouldn't lie by saying she will do everything possible. If it is possible for her to stop them, do your job, protect the people of this country. Steve says the marches are causing nothing but hate. They should be stopped immediately. If necessary, call the army in. And Penny in Essex says, I'm ashamed to say I'm English. This was once Great Britain, a country to be proud of, but now not, thanks to a weak and pathetic government and a woke and criminal police who are more concerned about hearty words on the internet, says Penny. That's often how it feels. People often don't feel protected by our police, by the institutions of the state. Let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
I feel a lot of Muslims will make this about themselves. They will start, and I get it, right? They're going to want to protect themselves. However, I feel as if they need to do way more in tackling anti-Semitism, and that is rampant within the community. Have we hit the point of no return where we're pandering to the extremists, we're doing nothing about these people, and I don't know, the whole thing is an absolute mess, and I feel really, really sorry for the Jewish community. And like I said, I don't speak for every single Muslim, I only speak for myself, but I feel I need to apologise on behalf of the Muslims in this country.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, has been talking about the scourge of anti-Semitism. This is what he has been saying.
I've been to the scene to pay my respects and to get a sense of what you were confronted with. I've also seen the body-worn cameras and the footage out of that. And I am absolutely clear in my mind as to the professionalism of the response, the speed of the response, and also that an absolutely awful incident would have been even worse if it hadn't been for your response. This was a dreadful attack, a terrorist attack to inflict fear, attacking Jews because they are Jews. And it's really important today that the whole country comes together, people of all faiths and no faiths, to stand in support and solidarity with our Jewish community. And I know that your work and everything you've done will help to that end, but it is something the whole country now needs to do. We must defeat anti-Semitism.
That's Keir Starmer speaking there at Greater Manchester Police Headquarters. The Community Security Trust, which is an organisation that provides private security measures outside synagogues and Jewish institutions, it's issued guidance to help Jewish people feel safe. It's told them not to congregate outside communal premises and synagogues and to keep their doors closed at all times. It recorded 4,296 anti-Semitic incidents in 2003. That was then 3,528 in 2024, the two highest numbers on record. And it's not just in this country as well. There have been violent incidents against Jewish people in synagogues in so many places. Just this week, 3 suspected members of Hamas were arrested in Germany for allegedly planning attacks on Israeli and Jewish institutions in the country. A young couple who worked at the Israeli embassy in Washington were shot dead outside a Jewish museum in May by a man shouting "Free Palestine." 2 petrol bombs were thrown at a synagogue in Berlin in October 2023. In the French city of La Grande Motte, a car believed to contain a bottle of gas was parked and set on fire last August outside a synagogue. Arson attacks in Vienna, Armenia in November, in Germany in April 2024, in Rouen in France in May 2024, and in Athens in June that year, and in Melbourne last December. Synagogues, a children's nursery in Golders Green in North London, of course many Jewish people live there, a very large population, smeared with faeces and urine last month. There have been several incidents of Nazi imagery, swastikas being painted on synagogues around the world. This is a huge problem. It's got worse since the 7th of October 2023. I want to talk now to Danny Stone MBE. He's the Chief Executive of the Anti-Semitism Policy Trust. Danny, do you believe Keir Starmer when he says he wants to sort this out?
Well, listen, I generally, my approach is to engage people in good faith. So, you know, the Labour Party had a crisis of anti-Semitism. Keir Starmer said he would deal with it in his party, and to a large extent he's done that. So we have to take him at his word, but he's got a mighty job on his hands. And
he may have dealt with it in the party, but what about the country?
Well, exactly. He has a really big challenge on his hands now, because from my perspective, for too long, anti-Semitism, there's been a permissiveness for anti-Semitism, and whether that be a failure to challenge anti-Semitic placards or chants on rallies that have been happening around the country, whether it be a failure of regulators, so in the health sector, for example, to strike off doctors making anti-Semitic statements, whether it be in our cultural sector, pop groups, rock acts that are allowed to espouse anti-Semitism from the stage. In nearly every sector and across workplaces, we are seeing problems. And so if he says he's going to deal with it, he's going to have a mighty task on his hands.
I mean, we're in a situation where Bob Villan, for example, at Glastonbury, the so-called musicians shouted "death, death" to the IDF. They then said that they weren't talking about individual soldiers. Lo and behold, footage emerged of them talking about individual soldiers. Then they shouted on another occasion, "F the Zionists." In fact, I'm going to play this right now of Bob Vylan, and the fact that many people like this band. They like bands like Kneecap, for example, that I would also argue, in my personally held belief, strongly held belief, are anti-Semitic in what they chant, sing and espouse. Let's hear what Bob Vylan shouted on this particular occasion.
The fascists, Zionists, get out there and fight them, get out there and meet them in the street, get out there and let them know that you do not stand by them. Do you understand me?
I mean, this is typical of what Bob Vylan have said and done on numerous occasions, and this level of anti-Semitism has been played out at so many of these railway station protests. When you see that, especially on a day like yesterday, especially when you see 2 members of your community who've been killed, when you see at least 3 people still in hospital with critical injuries, Danny, what goes through your head when you say politicians will do everything they can? Because my point is, they haven't done everything they can for the last 2 years, have they?
Well, no, you're right. You're right. I mean, I see that footage. I'm a Zionist, so it's not something that I ought to be approached in the street and attacked, because it looks to me like incitement to violence. So I'm very clear on that band. I think that they shouldn't be given the platforms in any of the venues across the country, and anyone who has any sense of public safety and British values really shouldn't be platforming.
Well, they're due to play Manchester in a few weeks.
Right.
We've asked the venue in Manchester whether Bob Vylan will continue to play there. Answer came there, none. But your clear view seems to be that they should not.
Yeah, well, they've repeatedly doubled down on the kind of statements that they're making, and what you played was outright, to my mind, anti-Semitism. So I'm very clear on that. So too, you mentioned Kneecap. Well, one of the members of the band put up a post on social media reading the speeches of former Hezbollah leader Nasrallah, who was a Holocaust denier and an anti-Semite. And there should be consequences for doing that. This is a band that has a following and is amplifying, if not anti-Semitism itself, then those who have espoused anti-Semitism. Is not good enough. There needs to be zero tolerance. And so, yes, I expect politicians to be calling it out. And where they have those venues in their constituency where those bands are playing, I see no reason why they shouldn't be writing to those venues saying, is this the appropriate thing for you to platform?
What about the protests at the weekend? My view on this, Danny, I don't know what yours is. My view is that I want people to have freedom to protest. That's the kind of freedoms we have that Hamas, for example, and many of the totalitarian regimes in many parts of the Middle East don't allow. I was actually in Israel a few weeks ago, and there was a protest there against Netanyahu and against what his government is doing, which many people feel very, very strongly about in Israel, because guess what? It's a democracy and people can protest. That is a fundamental value. But I would also say that there's got to be some level of common sense, of decency, of realising that, look, the Palestinian cause will be there in a week or 2. You can protest about it then. You don't have to go out on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, my challenge has always been to the organisers of these protests. What are you doing to stamp out the anti-Semitism that we've seen at these protests, the placards, the chants? There has been a failure to condemn that from the stage. There's been a failure to brief stewards to ensure that they are kicking these people out from the protests. And yes, I think people will make up their own minds about how appropriate it is in the wake of this anti-Semitic terrorist attack for the protests to be on this weekend. The Home Secretary's made her view clear, and I share it. I do think that people will make up their own minds about how these people are conducting themselves.
Yeah. Danny, thank you for your thoughts. That's Danny Stone there. Wish you well. He is the Chief Executive of the Anti-Semitism Policy Trust, and they are involved with the All-Party Parliamentary Group Against Anti-Semitism. We're going to talk in a second to Israel's UN international spokesman, because, of course, not just about this, about what Gideon Saar, who is the Foreign Minister, has been saying about the response from the UK, but also from this perspective of the Israeli government in regard to a Hamas deal, because Donald Trump has said Sunday's the deadline. Hamas need to come back on that. Will there be peace in Gaza? I hope there is. I don't want any Palestinian of any stripe, certainly not innocent civilians, to face any to face any violence. I will absolutely cry no tears if Hamas terrorists die, but there are so many innocent civilians on both sides of the Gaza border who need peace, who need the Middle East to be stable and secure. We'll talk to Jonathan Harunoff in just a second. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, Gideon Saar, who is the Foreign Minister of Israel, has put out a statement just in the last few minutes saying that he spoke to Yvette Cooper, our Foreign Secretary, of course, at her initiative following what he calls the horrific anti-Semitic terror attack in Manchester. Gideon Saar says, I said this is a decisive moment in the UK's own history for preserving its character, and it requires relentlessly combating the poisonous anti-Semitic movement. I raised the need to fight the pro-Palestinian marches and protests which bear anti-Semitic traits and at times include explicit support for terror. I said that this rabid incitement rightly disturbs the Jewish community in Britain deeply, and it must be fought aggressively and determinedly, says the Foreign Minister of Israel. I emphasise anti-Zionism as a form of anti-Semitism, also according to the definition. I raised the severity in which we view the Labour Conference's decision from a few days ago, which adopted the false lies and libels against Israel of genocide and ethnic cleansing. The Foreign Secretary clarified these decisions do not reflect the government's policy, and the government dismissed them. I thanked her for her clarification. We also discussed our mutual support for President Trump's plan to end the war in Gaza. Well, let's speak to Jonathan Harunoff now. He is Israel's UN international spokesman. He's also the author of a very good book called Unveiled Inside Iran's Women, Life, Freedom, Revolt. Jonathan, it's good to talk to you, but it's on another sad day. Dreadful attack in the UK, which I know is your home country as well. From the UN perspective, the UN has been found wanting in so many ways. Is it going to condemn this, do you think? Should they? What has been the reaction in New York?
Thanks for having me, Peter. The reaction, I would say, from the United Nations has been quite tepid. We saw a sort of boilerplate statement be published by the Secretary General shortly after the terror attack that took place over Yom Kippur, but we're not going to see any emergency Security Council sessions, any serious press conferences, nothing of that kind, unfortunately. But in response to the statement that you had read out and by Israel's foreign minister, I would like to echo that statement that the UK has got to stop being a society that is solely reactive to such atrocities. I think that's what was being alluded to there. You have to be much more proactive in order to avoid such tragedies from taking place in the first place. Of course, the platitudes, the expressions of sympathy and solidarity are appreciated at these horrendous times, but they do not prevent acts of terror from occurring in the first place. And we saw Prime Minister Starmer shortly after the attacks yesterday saying that he would do everything he can to protect Britain's Jewish community. But then only a few hours later, we saw these emergency protests taking place across London, even in Liverpool Street Station, where they were applauding this Gaza selfie flotilla that was approaching Israel, where we saw chants of globalize the Intifada, where we saw apparent celebrations of what took place in Manchester just hours earlier. And that doesn't really suggest that everything is being done to prevent such atrocities from occurring again and again.
We also saw some footage from Greta Thunberg's flotilla of boats that actually had no aid. They didn't have any aid for the people of Gaza, and actually Israel previously said they would bring in the aid, but the flotilla didn't have anything for them. It was for selfies, it was for videos, it was for likes and clicks. It wasn't to help people in a bad humanitarian situation, was it?
I mean, the only thing it does is it demands and dominates media attention, grabs headlines. Israel has been very explicit that there are proper channels to deliver humanitarian aid, but doing it through this selfie flotilla that's not benefiting anyone is absolutely not the way to do so. So they were, just like they were previously, Greta and her selfie team were peacefully disembarked from their flotillas, and they'll be deported. And of course, all of this took place during the holiest day of the Jewish calendar, Yom Kippur. Yeah. So Israel was not only dealing with that, it was not only dealing with 5 missiles being launched by Gaza towards Israel as Yom Kippur was coming in, but we were also dealing with this deadly, horrific massacre in Manchester. I think the most concerning thing of all is that there was a sort of trepidation leading up to Yom Kippur. At least I felt it personally. And people...
Were you shocked by what happened yesterday, Jonathan? Because I'm not sure I was.
These things are always shocking, but it's almost a cliche, unfortunately, to this point, but it's hardly surprising. I think I certainly had some trepidation switching off my phone for 25 hours, not knowing what kind of world I'll be re-emerging into, whether Hamas had rejected the deal, or whether something happened with the hostages, God forbid, or there was a terror attack in New York or anywhere else in the world. And unfortunately, those fears were confirmed, where we emerged from Yom Kippur, from the holiest day, one of the purest day of the Jewish calendar, to learn of this horrendous massacre and a murder in my home country, the peaceful Jewish community that was just praying. And we also heard some more news about the tremendous heroism that we saw inside the synagogue as well, where we heard of the rabbi and other congregants barricading themselves, preventing this terrorist from inflicting even more harm.
Yeah. Just for people who aren't Jewish or don't understand, in regard to Yom Kippur, often Jewish people don't use their electronic devices. They try to stay away from technology on Yom Kippur itself. And Jonathan was talking about switching off his phone there, as so many Jewish people do. I wonder, Jonathan, just in regard to your position in New York and where Israel is at the moment in regard to Gaza, in regard to what Trump has been saying, the Sunday deadline for a Hamas deal. He says all hell against the group will be unleashed if it doesn't accept the terms. This is his Truth Social post saying an agreement must be reached by Sunday at 6 p.m. We've sometimes seen these deadlines come and go. Are you confident that that deadline is going to be held? Is that an American deadline? Is that an Israeli deadline? What's the line on that?
President Trump's team have been very explicit and I think very clear to negotiating parties, including Hamas, about the exact deadline, and they've had plenty of time. I mean, Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump unveiled this proposal earlier this week on Monday, and we've had almost a week go by where there hasn't been much response. And this is a proposal that will benefit both Israelis and people in Gaza who want a brighter future away from the tyranny of Hamas. But we're still awaiting a response, and we're praying that we can see the return of all of our hostages, both deceased and alive, within 72 hours, the full dismantlement of the Hamas terror organization. And I hope, the same way you mentioned before, that we can return towards a path to peace. But the Hamas terrorist organization, they know the deadline is looming, and it would be in their best interest to respond accordingly.
What chances of success do you think the ceasefire deal has?
We'll have to, the ball is in Hamas's court. They know that Israel is going to do whatever it takes to return all of these hostages home. They know that the conflict in Gaza won't end before the return of all of these individuals who were stolen almost 2 years ago to this day. We're approaching the 2-year anniversary of this massacre. Israel won't stop until all of those people are retrieved. So it is in Hamas's best interest to approach this deal in good faith. It's also important to reiterate, and sometimes it gets lost in the media, that this isn't a deal that is entirely favorable to Israel. It involved tremendous concessions on Israel's part. It involved the release of hundreds of convicted terrorists, and also many hundred more, if not thousands more, people who've been detained since the October 7th massacre. So it involves their release and a few other concessions, and Israel immediately accepted it, as we saw in the White House with President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, and we're still waiting for Hamas's response.
Jonathan, as always, thank you. That's Jonathan Harunoff there, who is Israel's UN international spokesman, joining us there from New York. He's also the author of a book called Unveiled Inside Iran's Women, Life, Freedom, Revolt, which I highly recommend. I interviewed him about that previously. Thank you to Leslie, who says we shouldn't forget Starmer campaigned for Corbyn to be Prime Minister, while anti-Semitism flourished in the Labour Party under Corbyn. Paul says Starmer and Labour's only interest is pandering to the Muslim voters, 4 million potential voters as opposed to the Jewish 300,000. They cynically recognise Palestine too, because it's party first, country last. And Bill says Nigel Farage is correct, but they should cancel the march in London. But Starmer won't call them out. He does not care about the British people. It's just another minority group that has power over him, or is it just votes, says Bill T. Lots more to discuss. We've got the former independent reviewer of terrorism legislation and independent reviewer of state threats legislation, Jonathan Hall, KC. He's going to be with us next on the terrorism angle. There's so much to discuss about this, and I want to make sure that you have your say too. 0344 499 1000.
I feel a lot of Muslims will make this about themselves. They will start, and I get it, right? They're going to want to protect themselves. However, I feel as if they need to do way more in tackling anti-Semitism, and that is rampant within the community. Have we hit the point of no return where we're pandering to the extremists, we're doing nothing about these people, and I don't know, the whole thing is an absolute mess, and I feel really, really sorry for the Jewish community. And like I said, I don't speak for every single Muslim, I only speak for myself, but I feel I need to apologise on behalf of the Muslims in this country.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just want to bring you some news we've just received in regard to the father of the Manchester synagogue terrorist. His name is Faraj al-Shami, so the terrorist himself is called Jihad al-Shami, or was called Jihad al-Shami. Faraj al-Shami, his father, praised the October the 7th Hamas terrorists as Allah's men on earth. He posted on Facebook his support for the invasion of Israel, in which 1,200 people were killed and 251 civilians and soldiers were taken hostage. He's a trauma surgeon from Syria. He lived in council housing in Britain, and in his post on the day of the attack, he said that the terrorists from Hamas had proved beyond a shadow of a doubt Israel would be destroyed eventually. He issued a statement earlier when he expressed his profound shock in the wake of the fact that 2 people had died at Heaton Park Synagogue in North Manchester. That happened yesterday, of course. His eldest son, the 35-year-old Jihad, rammed his car into worshippers. We know about that attack. But this translation of posts on Facebook shows him supporting the Hamas attack on Israel. I'm just going to read out what he wrote. The scenes broadcast by the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, Hamas terrorists, of a group of fighters, terrorists, supporting an occupation army camp with simple means, balloons and motorcycles, prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that Israel will not remain. Men like these prove they are God's men on earth, and regardless of who leads them, this is the true compass for men confident of their victory, even if their means are limited. As for you, men of the Levant, the wicked among you and the good among you will soon be made clear. Take good care of your weapons and aim them accurately at your brothers. And don't forget that you disobeyed your Lord's command, so you did not hold together and you dispersed to the bottom of the abyss. May God protect Palestine and its heroic people. God bless you, and may he bless you with the true men from the lineage of true men. On the 7th of October. On the 7th of October. Following on from that, he wrote on the 11th of October, a few days after the attack, our brothers in Gaza, a second surprise the size of what you did on the 7th will follow, talking about follow-up attacks, followed by the first resounding fall of a great traitor in our region. Trust in God if you have what you have, for what comes after the 7th of October is not like what came before, and millions of hearts await the causes of the relief they will get from such a surprise. So he was praising Hamas terrorists. This puts a very different spin on his alleged profound shock in the wake of what his son did. Jonathan Hall is a KC. He's independent reviewer of terrorism legislation and independent reviewer of state threats legislation. Jonathan, thank you for joining me on the show today.
Pleasure.
What do you make of what has just been revealed?
Well, these days we're all like investigators now, aren't we? I mean, this is what the police would normally do in the wake of a terrorist attack. They will look at the digital media, social media, what this person has been saying and looking at. And now we know from what has been found that at least his father was supportive of the terrorist attack. I don't know. I'm not sure we know at the moment what sort of contact there was between the murderer, the terrorist, and his father. But that is obviously something that the police are going to be looking at when they try and work out what precisely led him to carry out this heinous attack against Jews. Was it to do with October the 7th and what happened after that? Or was, for example, he inspired by Islamic State, which for a long time has been calling for simply attacks against Jews in the West? I mean, we don't know, and that's what they're going to try and find out.
We know that Jihad al-Shami was not on, referred to prevent, he was not on the radar of the security services. If someone, I wonder if his father was, we don't know that either, but if someone is posting things like that in praise of Hamas terrorists, surely the intelligence services should be able to pick that up. Or am I being unrealistic? Are there just so many people that post things like that that actually you can't monitor them all?
I think, I mean, you raise a really good question. I think it's unrealistic. So the authorities are not going to be surveilling all surface media from people. So they haven't got what you used to call a Twitter pipe. In other words, a feed of all of Twitter, and will be looking to try and find what people have said at that level. I mean, the things that the clever things that the MI5 and the intelligence agencies do are to look at much more serious. I mean, it's that what he said is bad, but what they are looking for is evidence of attack plans. So I don't think that sort of thing would lead someone necessarily to be referred to prevent. I mean, if they did it at a school, if there was an adult who was looking at that, they were a child and they were saying these things, they might be, but no. And of course, we don't know. It seems likely, but we don't know, do we? What precisely led this man to attack Jews in that way? We don't know whether it was Gaza or whether it was responding to this call from Islamic State. And the reason I say that is because there's attack methodology here. So the vehicle, the fake suicide belt, the knife, which is quite resonant of the attacks that happened in London and Manchester in 2017 and 2019, they were, of course, before Gaza. And I think what Jews will say is that they've been living with an insane amount of threat for years. I mean, 2023, the events after 7th of October will have increased it, but they still had security guards outside synagogues expecting this way before that. And they would have been looking at what happened in Europe, for example. There was a terrible attack on a synagogue in Italy. There was a terrible attack
many
in
attacks.
Germany.
Absolutely. So what happens now in regard to the terror aspect of this, Jonathan?
Well, I don't know that there's going to be some massive change in the law, because he was on a watch list, it sounds like. So there's no prevent issue. He wasn't a released terrorist prisoner, hasn't come on a small boat. So I don't think, unlike previous terrorist attacks, there's going to be a great big clamour for the law. And I think what people are going to be looking at, I suppose, is this, and I'm going to say it is awful, is this constant need for Jews to have more and more security. And I think the point that I would make, and I don't think it's appreciated enough, Jews have to put up with so much physical security. They have to spend so much time, members of congregations having to stand in a line, in a ring, outside synagogues, simply in order to worship, to have a high holy day or Shabbat. These sorts of things should not be normalized. And I've been struck, thinking as a lawyer, someone who is very aware of, after Manchester Arena, the Martin's Law that was brought in. And some of us, including me, thought, well, hang on a second, we don't want to make it too tough for members of the public just to go about their normal lives.
We've got to go to the news, Jonathan, but I hope to continue the conversation very, very soon. That Jonathan Hall, their independent reviewer of terrorism legislation. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good evening and welcome to Talk Drive. If you're just joining us, if you've been with us for the last hour, thank you. Loads to discuss, lots of developments on the Manchester terror attack. We know, of course, that 2 men are dead. One of them, it now appears, was killed by a police officer, a firearms officer. We know that there's been a vigil today. The Deputy Prime Minister, David Lammy, has been jeered there in Manchester. We also know that the father of Jihad al-Shami, who was the terrorist yesterday, we know that his father was on social media, on Facebook, praising the terrorists who undertook the 7th of October massacre. We know the father of that suspect appears to have posted contact supportive of the terrorist act of the 7th of October. We'll be talking about that with Stephen Silverman, the Director of Investigations and Enforcement of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. We'll also be talking to one of the bravest and most brilliant KCs in this country, Simon Myerson, who is an indefatigable campaigner against anti-Semitism. I followed him for a very, very long time, and I'll be chatting to him for the first time in a few minutes' time. There's so much to discuss, and I want to discuss it with you as well. 0344 499 1000. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp text message. You can send me a WhatsApp voice message, less than a minute, please. Or you can give me a ring, all on the main number, 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss here on Talk. Stay with us. We also know that Greater Manchester Police are going to refer themselves to the police watchdog over the attack. That's standard procedure when a firearm is utilised. There are just so many horrendous stories coming out of what happened yesterday, and so much bravery as well. The rabbi who locked people in the synagogue, who made sure that no more violence occurred and did everything he possibly could to protect his flock. I want to talk to Stephen Silverman now, Director of Investigations and Enforcement of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. Stephen, good evening. Your thoughts today?
Good evening. Well, the thoughts of everybody at Campaign Against Anti-Semitism are with the victims, their families, and the community as a whole up there for the horror of yesterday. The depressing thing, I have to say, is the reaction we've heard from Keir Starmer yesterday and David Lammy today. What we don't need right now is more commiseration, prayers, warm words, declarations that anti-Semitism has no place in the UK, because they're coming from people who had the opportunity to deal with this a long time ago and have not. It was very noticeable in David Lammy's speech at the vigil in Manchester today, and the crowd were having none of it, I have to say, that he talked about fighting terrorism just over a week after he rewarded terrorism by recognizing a Palestinian state that continues to hold Jewish hostages in abysmal conditions. And Keir Starmer's speech yesterday was just tone deaf. He talked about rising anti-Semitism. No, anti-Semitism was rising 7 or 8 years ago when he sat on Jeremy Corbyn's front bench and was trying to put an anti-Semite inside 10 Downing Street. It is now running riot through our society. And the man who swore when he became leader of the Labour Party to tear out anti-Semitism by the roots has done nothing to help the problem and has arguably made it worse. Right now, the Jewish community feels like it is being sacrificed on the altar of political expediency. And what we want our political representatives to do is stop treating this as a political numbers game, find some spine, stand up to the mob and deal with this problem in the way that it needs to be dealt with.
How should they do that? How should they find that spine? And I agree with every single word you've just said, Stephen. How do they find that spine? What do they do? What do they say?
Well, clearly there's no immediate sign, because last night in London and in Manchester, there was mobs on the street calling for intifada freely. Somebody has to recognize that there is a difference between peaceful, reasonable protest for peace and for Palestinian rights and protest that calls for intifada, jihad, the end of the world's only Jewish state, the destruction of a key part of Jewish identity, and allowing that to fan the flames of anti-Semitism. And it hasn't been done. There's no sign of it being done. And I have to say that when you look at the last 2 years, the government is complicit in what happened yesterday. The criminal justice system is complicit. Industry regulators are complicit. Our universities are complicit. And our national broadcaster is complicit. They have all had ample opportunity in their own way to act, to put the brakes on this rampant hatred, and they've done nothing, or they've taken actions that have made the matter worse. They should just be hanging their heads in shame today.
Those are very strong words, and they're words with which I agree. When you see what these politicians are saying, when you see that Israel, for example, the foreign minister is saying that not enough has been done, that there is not a plan of action, a proper plan of action. I just wonder, in relation specifically to this weekend and the protests, the further protests that are planned, what should happen?
They need to be stopped. I do not believe, and the Jewish community does not believe, that the government and the criminal justice system does not recognize what radical left and Islamist extremism is and looks like, and how dangerous it is to not just to the Jewish community, but to our entire society. They just need to stop it. They have the power to stop it. What they don't appear to have is the political will to stop it.
The family of Adrian Dolby is 53. He died in the Manchester synagogue terrorist attack after being accidentally shot by a policeman. Have described him as a hero who tragically lost his life in the act of courage to save others. We're just talking about that. That line has just come out. Adrian Dolby, he was 53, from Crumsall, and Melvin Kravitz was 66 and was killed by the terrorist, of course. When you hear, from your perspective, Stephen, that the family of this terrorist, Faraj al-Shami, who's his father, said that this attack was a profound shock to us. They say the al-Shami family in the UK and abroad strongly condemns this heinous act, which targeted peaceful, innocent civilians. And then we go back to what's been revealed about what the father of the terrorist posted on the 7th of October 2023, when he talked about the scenes broadcast by the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, Hamas terrorists, of a group of fighters, terrorists, storming an occupation army camp, Israeli camp, with simple means, prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that Israel will not remain. He's praising them. They prove they are God's men on earth. That's what he said on the 7th of October. Now he's saying it's a profound shock. I find that very difficult to believe.
Oh, look, and he's not alone. We've got senior politicians from various parties who did similar things, other figures who did similar things on October the 7th, now giving us their weasel words. We've allowed this extremism to take root. We've just not done anything to stop it. And we have to start now, because turning the ship around is going to be a slow process. And we have to kill off, once and for all, this ridiculous, ludicrous fiction that someone is only anti-Israel. I'm sorry, if you're opposed to the very idea of the existence of the Jewish state, then you are an anti-Semite. That is the end of it. And that kind of opinion has no business being broadcast on social media or on the streets in this country.
Stephen, as always, thank you. Are you going to be there on Sunday at Trafalgar Square?
Yes.
I will seek you out and I will hope to say hello there. I'm planning on going myself. That is Stephen Silverman there, who's Director of Investigations and Enforcement of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. We're going to talk now to Simon Meyerson KC. He is Chairman of the Leeds Jewish Representative Council. Simon, your Twitter is just superb. You are someone who stands up to bullies, who says it like it is. What are your thoughts today, especially as we have this new news that Faraj al-Shami, who is Jihad al-Shami's father, who said it was a profound shock previously on the 7th of October, managed to praise Hamas terrorists as they undertook their horrendous campaign of violence, maiming, raping, murdering, burning people, strangling babies. He was praising them on the 7th of October. Now he says he's profoundly shocked by his son's actions.
Yes, he does, doesn't he? You don't get born a murderer. You don't get born a radical. These are opinions that you acquire. There are psychopaths we know that who just think differently to the rest of us, but most people who kill aren't psychopaths. And so when I heard that this was presumably Islamic terrorism, the question is, well, what is the process of radicalization? And today seems to give us a clue. I'm not suggesting for one moment that his father told him to do this, but what it shows is that words and comments have real life consequences that go way beyond people's social media posts.
And that is something that many politicians, public figures, celebrities need to remember, don't they? Especially as we go into this weekend, especially as we go into a weekend of protests, certainly on Saturday. When you saw those protests last night, I just found it tasteless in the extreme. I would also find it very dangerous. I felt that there are going to be so many Jewish people who are feeling already under huge threat, who will not feel any safer, in fact will feel an awful lot less safe when they see those protests. What were your impressions?
Well, my first impression was the one that I share with you. It was crass beyond belief. But in fact, then it becomes more concerning. There are a group of people who are absolutely dedicated to pushing the envelope of Jew hatred as far as they can. And they were the people who protested on the 7th and the 8th of October 2023. Palestine Solidarity Campaign was planning its protest as the murders were happening. Those people are bad actors who should be of interest to the police and the security services. And then there are too many people who don't really think very hard and use this as their way to demonstrate what they conceive of as their own virtue. And what is so troubling is that last night, those people chose to mouth the slogans above and over empathy with the families of 2 dead British citizens. And that is sick. There's something that really requires examination about people's socialization and the way that they view their Jewish co-citizens, that they would make that choice. Not that they hate us, but that they love themselves so much that they can't even sit at home on a night where we are mourning. And that is distressing beyond measure.
When you hear that David Lammy has been heckled in Manchester, I've been in touch with someone there who says this is really something that just doesn't usually happen. And actually, someone who spoke before David Lammy says, we've heard enough, we know how you feel, I know how you feel, let's give the time for a Deputy Prime Minister to address us. And a protester shouted, my children's school was closed today, you allowed this to happen. One person shouted that the government was responsible for allowing Jew hatred and said, we do not want you here today, which led for a round of applause from others in the crowd. Let's actually see the clip of this now, of what happened in Manchester to the Deputy Prime Minister, David Lammy.
I have great pleasure in introducing our Deputy Prime Minister, David Lammy. And before I do, please, Please. We know how we all feel. We know how we all feel.
On the street. My children's school was closed today. You have allowed this to happen. David Lammy, you have allowed this to happen. You are all guilty of it all. You have allowed Jew hatred in Manchester on the street. You have allowed it. You are all guilty. We do not want you speaking here today. Do not speak. You defeated. Shame on you. 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 Shame on you.
David Lammy, stony faced there. Do you have any sympathy for him whatsoever, Simon?
A little. He was brave to go, but this is a democracy. I don't think those people necessarily represent the majority of the Jewish community, but they are, nor are they, wholly isolated voices. People are hurt, people are angry, and they, like me, trace what happened yesterday back to the continued pushing of the envelope of rhetoric that is acceptable on our streets. And he is the man at the tip of the spear. He's paid good money to take it, and it won't do him any harm to hear it.
What are your thoughts as well? We're moving into a time, obviously, protests at the weekend. We've got their vigils on the second anniversary of the 7th of October is coming up. There's going to be a demonstration in London for that. There's also, in regard to the Middle East, there's also a huge deadline in regard to Hamas terrorists there. Just tell us how you see all of this playing out over the next few days. It's going to be a tense time between now and Tuesday for quite a number of reasons.
My overwhelming concern is that we don't see a copycat attack. I think anyone who is involved in the leadership of a Jewish community, that's all we're thinking about. It's been most of my day. What's happening in Israel is a matter of individual view. I know that there are people in my community who don't agree with my stance on it, and obviously there are lots of views. There is nothing that anyone in Britain can do about that. And at a time when there has been an anti-Semitic murder, what I would say to people is, please, whatever your views, sit on your hands this weekend. People who want to demonstrate in support of what they conceive of as Palestinians, but ignore the Palestinians in Gaza who almost now unanimously want Hamas gone, those people are not only not helping, they are actively hindering. And they are frightening Jews because the rhetoric they spout has now resulted in a death. They shouldn't go.
Simon, it's great to talk to you. I've been a fan for a long time. You speak so much sense. I hope we will speak again very soon. That's Simon Myerson, KC, is the chairman of Leeds Jewish Representative Council. Lots to discuss. Let me know what you think. 0344 499 1000. We'll talk to Jonathan Sacher-Doty in a moment, who is a journalist and broadcaster, to get his view on this. We'll hear from viewers and listeners as well. Lots to discuss. Stay with us here on Talk.
feel a lot of Muslims will make this about themselves. They will start, and I get it, right? They're going to want to protect themselves. However, I feel as if they need to do way more in tackling anti-Semitism, and that is rampant within the community. Have we hit the point of no return where we're pandering to the extremists, we're doing nothing about these people, and I don't know, the whole thing is an absolute mess, and I feel really, really sorry for the Jewish community. And like I said, I don't speak for every single Muslim, I only speak for myself, but I feel I need to apologise on behalf of the Muslims in this country.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to everyone who's been in touch, including Khaled in Leicester, who's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Khaled, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Yeah, I think, like I was telling you, the colleague there, basically, all of the Muslim community up and down the country, all of the mosques, we absolutely condemn this atrocity that this person has committed. It is absolutely appalling. We absolutely everybody condemns this action. Nobody supports this. It's got nothing to do with our faith, nothing to do with Islam, nothing to do with Muslims whatsoever. And at the same time, I'm saying we should all unite in condemnation, and there has to be consistency in condemnation of any evil, any atrocities committed throughout the world. The problem we have, should I say, as human beings, when there's inconsistencies of condemnation, inconsistencies of empathy, we pick and choose. That's where the problem lies. We should all unite against any terrorism, against any atrocities, against any unjust, evil actions that it takes place against innocents. So this is the thing. Like I said, we've got multi-faith communities here in Leicester, up and down the country, in fact. And we all get on with our, even in Leicester, we get on with our Jewish compatriots. And when there are marches, I mean, I've not been on these marches myself, but when there are, we know that there are people from all faiths, including the Jewish communities on these. Well,
let's talk a little bit about those, Khaled. I just wonder, when you look at what's going to happen, when you looked at what happened last night, the pro-Palestinian protests, you look at what's planned for Saturday. What would your message to the people going on those be? Because my message to them would be, you've protested before, you can protest again, but now's just not the time. Maybe stay at home. What would your thoughts be on that?
You see, the thing is, Peter, look, what's happening in Manchester is an atrocity. It is absolutely appalling. It should never happen, first of all. But at the same time, we have to accept what is happening on a daily basis in Palestine. It's every day. It's not a one-off. It's every single day. Even when there's talks of peace, or even on that day, even when those talks are taking place.
And I don't disagree with that, Khaled. But my point is that surely there is a time and a place for peaceful protest. Surely there's a time and a place to wave a Palestinian flag, to make that point clear. And the time and the place was not last night, and the time and the place is not Saturday. That's my view.
No, that's what I'm saying. What I'm saying, Peter, is obviously I don't. You see, it's not at the same time. My point is, look, it's a few days away, but look, that's been planned from before. This was never. I mean, the marches are not planned just randomly.
Well, the protests last night were. I'm not holding you responsible for them, Khaled. I know you weren't on them yourself, but the fact is that they were spontaneous, and there were people waving Palestinian flags who were celebrating the death of Jewish people.
Yeah, well, that's out of order. That's completely out of order. It's got nothing to do with Islam, first of all. I have to emphasize that, because people say, oh, these are Muslims. It's nothing to do with Islam or Muslims. When any innocent person loses their life, as a Muslim, as my faith teaches, we should be appalled and disgusted, and we should grieve.
You see, I like what you're saying today, Khaled, but on previous occasions when we've spoken, you have failed to call what happened on the 7th of October terrorism, and you failed to call Hamas terrorists. Would you like to clarify that position today, Khaled?
I'm telling you, I even mentioned this before, as we have talked previously before, Peter. I've said any innocent person is killed unjustly, that is terrorism, that should be condemned, regardless of anybody.
So you're happy to call Hamas terrorists, and you're happy to call what happened on the 7th of October specifically, without saying all, catch-all, all dreadful, which I think we can all agree. You're happy specifically to say that Hamas are terrorists, and you're happy specifically to say that the 7th of October was terrorism and to be condemned.
You see, Peter, you're using the same old.
No, I'm not using the same old anything. I'm saying that either you believe this or you don't.
No, you see what you're stating is ridiculous under the current situation.
Why is it ridiculous?
It is wrong.
In what way is it
ridiculous?
It's perfectly
It is
reasonable.
ridiculous because I can't answer that in one question because this does not stem back. This is not
You can answer it very, very straightforwardly, and you failed to, Khaled.
No, but Peter, listen to me. You have to listen to this, right? The thing is, the Palestinians, even before even a thought in anyone's minds in that Palestinian territories, they were being massacred and brutalized. They were being tortured.
Khaled,
they were being
we've had this conversation before. Why can't you just say it? I mean, you started well, and then you ended very, very badly. And I'm sorry, I've just got to move on, Khaled. I've given you an opportunity, and I'm afraid you failed in it. There's a breaking line now. Reports are saying that the Manchester synagogue terrorist was on police bail for an alleged rape when he carried out the attack. This is the Telegraph reporting this. Jihad al-Shami, who was 35, was under investigation over an alleged sexual attack, which is understood to have taken place earlier this year. The Syrian-born British citizen is believed to have other criminal convictions, but was not on the radar of counter-terrorism officers. He wasn't referred to prevent. We know what he did. We know that one man lost his life, one man was murdered. Melvin Kravitz, 66, and Adrian Dolby was shot by mistake by the police. They were both killed in the attack. But this is a breaking line that's being reported by the Telegraph newspaper that the Manchester synagogue terrorist was on police bail for an alleged rape when he carried out the attack, under investigation over an alleged sexual attack understood to have taken place earlier this year. Jonathan Sacerdoti is with me, the journalist and broadcaster. Jonathan, your reaction to that breaking line?
Hi, Peter.
Hi there.
Well, listen, we're beginning to find out more and more about this jihad guy, and it seems to me to be clear that this is certainly somebody that the authorities were aware of in some senses, whether or not he had been referred to prevent or whether or not they knew that he had inclinations towards terror. It certainly doesn't inspire us with hope or faith in the abilities of the police and the legal enforcement in this country that somebody like that was able to go and carry out this act. And what I'll say is this, that we saw in that Manchester event today where David Lammy went and was really completely blind to the room, deaf to the room, deaf to the moods that the Jewish community there is in, and the whole nation, I would say.
And we know, Jonathan, don't we? We know he's not going to understand that. He's not going to get that. He's not going to understand why those people were heckling him and saying, where have you been for the last 2 years? Where have you been for the last 10 years, David? And what you've done as Foreign Secretary was lay the groundwork to the recognition of a Palestinian state, and also done very little about anti-Semitism in this country.
Well, I'll say this as well. It takes a lot to find a group of Jewish people in an official situation like that to behave in the way that we saw today. And I would say that they were polite. There wasn't swearing. There were no flares. There was no throwing of things. There was no violence. That is not the way of the Jewish community in this country. But what there was a palpable sense of anger at the Deputy Prime Minister and a previous Foreign Minister who had, as far as the Jewish community largely feels in this country, utterly betrayed Jewish Britons. And I say Jewish Britons because that's who these people are. We are Britons, and we feel, many of us, betrayed by how this government is acting in relation to Israel. And it's not possible to separate out their actions and what they say about Israel in this moment where Israel is fighting against the jihadist terrorists of Hamas and the other Palestinian terrorist factions, at a time when Donald Trump and the Americans are working hard to actually carry out a peace process that could get the hostages returned and that could start to move towards getting the Palestinians away from violence, away from terrorism, and for their own sake, if they want a state, this is what they'll need to do. And instead, what did our nation do under this very Foreign Secretary, now Deputy Prime Minister, and this Prime Minister? Instead, they gave a reward to Hamas, which really incentivized them not to make any compromises, not to give back the hostages, and rewarded them with the promise of statehood for a people who have time and again committed themselves to violence and terrorism. And it's enough. If these two Jewish people's lives should not be for nothing, if the Jewish community in this country, which has contributed enormously to this country, can contribute once again, it should be in what we saw today, a polite but firm rising up against the idiotic, damaging and dangerous actions of this government and in some respects previous governments, drawing the country's attention to what this is. This was not just an attack on Jews. This was an attack on Britons. This was an attack on people worshipping in their place of worship. I would say that it starts with the Jews and then it goes elsewhere, but it didn't start with the Jews in this country. Islamic terrorism in that same city blew up Manchester Arena. I stood outside it and reported for hours and hours after that happened. Little girls at an Ariana Grande concert. Now they've killed Jews at prayer on Yom Kippur, our holiest day, in a synagogue. And Jewish blood is not cheap. The Jewish community, I think, has finally found its anger and found its discontent over this. And I think that what the government is going to understand is that people demand actions. Everything that the Jewish community has said, at least the majority of us, over the last 2 years about those hate marches, about these violent marches, about those sorts of reactions to our tragedies, whether it's October the 7th or whether it's here in Manchester, the reactions of jubilation and celebration and trying to disrupt British life is not something that this government should be rewarding or tolerating. And as those hecklers said to Lammy, they need to stop it, not for our sake, but for Britain's sake, for their sake, for the sake of this whole nation. And if that's the lesson that the Jews are going to teach to the nation, if we're going to wake them up to that, then so be it. That's what I say. And, you know, for this man called Jihad to have gone and killed Jewish people only months after the Metropolitan Police in London told us that jihad can have lots of meanings. And so those people, when Hizb ut-Tahrir met on the streets and called for jihad in this country, they need to get real. I think most people listening to this, most decent British people, understand fully what we're dealing with here. And they want this government to start to act properly, to start to protect this nation, the whole nation, including its Jewish people. And I'm sorry if I sound passionate or angry about it, but it's because I am angry about it. I've been angry about it for years as we have seen Islamic terrorist attacks in this country, killing British people time and again. And now they have killed 2 Jewish people or resulted in the death of these 2 Jewish people in that attack on Yom Kippur. It's enough. People will not stand for this anymore. And this government really needs to stop with the platitudes and pre-written speeches and expecting people to bow down for what they're saying. They just need to have a little bit of backbone.
Jonathan, I'm not Jewish, but I feel passionate and I feel angry, so I can only imagine what someone of your integrity, the fight that you have in you, the fact that you stand up for your community, the fact that you say so many things that need to be said and have, even when they're unpopular. I just would feel, I can only imagine how you feel at the moment. Thank you for contributing to this programme. I really appreciate it. And I think there's a salutary lesson from Jonathan there, which is let's not judge the politicians and Keir Starmer and David Lammy and Shabana Mahmood by what they say. Let's judge them by what they do. Your thoughts on all of that coming up in just a moment here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lots of reaction, including from Lady Anne, who says Khaled in Leicester there won't condemn Hamas terrorists, Peter. He never does. He doesn't believe they're wrong. He is a snake. That is Lady Anne's opinion. Now, I allowed him to have his say. I asked him on a couple of occasions to condemn Hamas as terrorists. He did not. Lady Anne also makes the point, says, we were told yesterday the Manchester attacker was not known to the police. They lied again. Well, we were told that he wasn't referred to prevent, he wasn't known to counter-terrorism police. I don't think it was ever actually said. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong on this, but I don't remember yesterday, I'm just looking at the faces behind the glass here, I don't remember yesterday saying that he wasn't known to police at all necessarily. But listen, there is an awful lot that we will get into on all of this. So many people getting in touch, especially now that we know the father of the suspect, the father of the terrorist, appears to have posted content supportive of the terrorist acts of the 7th of October. This is yesterday, statement from Faraj al-Shami, who is Jihad al-Shami, the terrorist father. The targeting of the Jewish synagogue has been a profound shock to us. But actually, we know that on the 7th of October, he talked about the terrorists, Hamas terrorists, saying that they are God's men on earth. So a bit of a change in tack there. We also know that the Manchester synagogue terrorist was on police bail for an alleged rape when he carried out the attack. He was under investigation over an alleged sexual attack, which is understood to have taken place earlier this year. We know that Melvin Kravitz died. He was murdered, 66-year-old, and Adrian Dolby from Crumpsall. He died in the attack because he was mistakenly shot by the police firearms officer who also killed the terrorist. The family of Adrian Dolby, who died, have described him as a hero who tragically lost his life in the act of courage to save others. We know as well that many government ministers and politicians have said all sorts of things. Well, actually, the people of Manchester and the Jewish people who were at the vigil today had no time, really, for David Lammy. In fact, before he was introduced, the former Foreign Secretary experienced this.
I have great pleasure in introducing our Deputy Prime Minister, David Lammy. And before I do, please, 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 we know how we all feel. We know how we all feel.
On the street. My children's school was closed today. You have allowed this to happen. David Lammy used to allow this to happen. You are all guilty. I mean, all you have allowed Jew hatred in Manchester on the street. You have allowed it. You are all guilty. We do not want you speaking here today. You do not speak. Shame on you. 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 Shame on you.
David Lammy there, stony-faced as that occurred at the vigil. Well, let's get a few of your views on this. Mick says he was not brave to go to Manchester. He was stupid and attention-seeking, says Mick. Mark in Coventry says, so the father of that scumbag who committed that horror yesterday has praised Hamas for the 7th of October. Did we not grant them asylum from Syria? Why is he not on the next plane out of here? Kick him out, says Mark in Coventry. I find it difficult to understand, says John, the attitudes against the Jewish faith. Then sadly I stop and consider I have such an attitude against an ideological religion that is now being brought into the UK, which is alien to the West. Sean in Gloucester says, we're now seeing the results of the woke left-wing apologists allowing unrestricted immigration. I'm sorry to say this, but they're going a long way to ruin this country, and I fear a massive backlash. The people are fed up and have had enough. Starmer, Lammy and the others have blood on their hands. This is a sentiment that many people were saying yesterday. We're the home of free speech here. We let you say what you want to say within the law. And if that is your opinion, Sean, that's your opinion. Let's get another opinion now from Caroline in London, who has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Caroline, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Thank you so much, Peter. Please give me a bit of... I've got a few points I'd really
Go for it. Go for it, Caroline. We're in no rush.
Be as calm as I can. Great. So the first thing I want to say is that Keir Starmer, what Shabana Mahmood said yesterday at the protests after this, it wasn't very British. And now to say, please don't go to this protest. Number one, that says it all. Number two, the way they behaved yesterday, if that had been white people, you can imagine what the government would have said. They're clearly not going to do anything. These protests need to stop for several reasons. Yes, I agree with free speech and we should be allowed to protest. These are not protests anymore, right? They are hate speeches. Everybody knows that. That's number one, and I feel very strongly about that. This is creating more hate. This government are the ones that have created divide and hatred. And the other point I want to make is Alex this morning on talkTV, they did a whole thing on reporting of certain mosques that were speaking hate speech over 10 years ago, reported it to the Home Office. Nothing's been done. The biggest problem we've got in this country now is that throughout the country, people have been brainwashed through the mosques, through schools. So I don't know how this is going to end. I don't even know if it can end. We've been infiltrated everywhere, in schools, in universities, in the civil service, everywhere. So how do we solve that? And somebody made a very good statement yesterday on talkTV, someone who phoned up and said yesterday was a very small example of October the 7th. Because on October the 7th, already there was a demonstration being organised by midday.
That's right.
Right? So look what happened yesterday.
Yeah.
In London, in Edinburgh, in Glasgow, everywhere. It's out of control. This is not a government, Peter. These are legal criminals, and they've got blood on their hands. The other point I wanted to make, just one more, if you don't mind, is a few weeks ago there was an anti-Semitic march with 70,000 people. There was a member of Reform there, and there was a member of the Tory party. Not one single Labour MP was there. They've made it very clear.
No, just to say, Caroline, you're talking about the march against anti-Semitism. There was actually one Labour MP there, at least, a woman called Joni Reid. But you're right. There needed to be more Labour people there. There needed to be a cabinet minister on that stage talking about how bad anti-Semitism was.
Exactly. And so, as Jonathan just brilliantly spoke, their words mean nothing. Absolutely. You've got the Home Secretary who's been on marches, pro-Palestinian marches. One of her greatest achievements is her Muslim religion. That's fine. But look who she is, look where she is, look at the power she's got. It is disgusting that we're going to have a huge march in London again. This is nearly 3 years on.
Yeah.
Businesses can't even... businesses are suffering.
Well, they are suffering, and it's 2 years on Tuesday from the 7th of October. Caroline, listen, thanks for your points. I appreciate them. That's Caroline in London there. I want to talk to Bob now. He's in Nottingham and has given me a ring. Bob, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Peter, I'm talking about the Manchester murders. So another glaring example of two-tier justice system, in my opinion. So you've got this murdering terrorist Muslim that's carried out this atrocity. You've now revealed, well done talk, you've now revealed that his father, a radical Muslim, has posted on Instagram praise for Hamas on the October the 7th atrocity, and goes on then to suggest that his Muslim brothers should raise arms and carry on and repeat it.
Yeah, he called them God's men on earth.
Yes. Now, forgive me if I'm wrong, but there is a law that forbids, it's a criminal act to incite violence, either by speech or by posting. Or so if Lucy Connolly can post an ill-thought-out tweet to incite violence, and the next thing she's serving time in prison, how come this guy, this father of this murdering terrorist, how come he's not been visited by 6 burly policemen, tapping him on the shoulder and taking him down the station?
I would imagine that visit is happening now, or will happen soon. But you're absolutely right, Bob. This kind of stuff, and it's not just the fact that he posted it; it's the fact that he knew he could post it and nothing would happen to him. And there are so many people who post this kind of stuff all the time, praising terrorists, and they know nothing will happen. And then we see, as you correctly point out, various people, the two-tier nature of this, people putting stuff online, Graham Linehan, Lucy Connolly and others. Now, I'm not defending Lucy Connolly. I think she should have got a caution for what she did. I don't think she should have been in prison. I've said that before. But we're not seeing the law applied equally here, Bob. And that is one of the many, many issues around this.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
I mean, you go back to Glastonbury and that idiot
Yeah, no arrests for Bob Villan. Very, very good point. What on earth are Somerset and Avon police doing about that? Bob, really appreciate the call. Thank you very much indeed. Well, Sadiq Khan, Sir Sadiq, Knight of the Realm, who is, of course, the Mayor of London, he has refused to endorse calls for the pro-Palestine protesters to cancel their demonstrations following the Manchester synagogue terror attack. Well, I, for one, am shocked. The Labour Mayor of London stopped short of demanding organisers to call off Saturday's protest. Instead, he defended the right to peaceful and lawful protest and said those considering attending should be mindful of the appalling terror attack. A spokesman for Sir Sadiq said, Sadiq has always said that protest is a fundamental cornerstone of democracy, but must be peaceful, lawful and safe. He urges those considering protesting tomorrow to be mindful of the appalling terror attack this week, which has devastated our frightened Jewish communities. We all have a responsibility to consider how our words and actions make others feel. He added, as Londoners living side by side with each other, we must always be cognizant of how our actions affect others and seek to support those from other communities. Now more than ever, we need to stand together and show the terrorists who seek to divide us that they will never win. Do you think Sadiq Khan has helped things by that? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Attitudes towards women and girls, and yes, where it is prevalent, anti-Semitism. And that is wrong. We've got to therefore have a different immigration system that puts the safety of the British public, whether it's British Jews or anyone else, first, second and last.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Loads of people getting in touch. Thank you to Sue, who says Keir Starmer stands as much chance of defeating anti-Semitism as he does of smashing the gangs. I really cannot listen to him or any of his cabinet and take them seriously. They do nothing. They just speak in platitudes, says Sue. Adrian says, regarding your guest comments about the security services not monitoring surface comms, Facebook, etc., they managed to do it during COVID very effectively, as I recall. Another person being in touch to say, Khan has to go. Absolutely disgusting. Howard has also been in touch to say, slimy Starmer has been cowardly. The answer is to ban all Palestinian protests immediately until further notice. Until further notice means make it clear to the organisers what will and will not be acceptable in future marches, language, chanting, flags, bandanas, etc. Probably too late. Could have been nipped in the bud 2 years ago, like all criminal elements. If you don't nip it in the bud, it will escalate, says Howard. Stephen has also been in touch, Stephanie has been in touch and says, Stephen is spot on. The government do know what they're doing. The big question is why they will continue to ignore what is going on. Smart, intelligent youngsters are leaving. The intelligent, tax-paying Jews will go and be replaced by people who hate us and will never contribute. I want to go to London for my goddaughter's graduation, but I'm scared. She is black, beautiful and intelligent. Stephanie, I really want you to go to that. That's a really, really important family day. I don't want you to be scared. I want you to go and enjoy that and take whatever measures you need within the law to make sure that you feel safe. I want to talk to Will Geddes now, the security expert. Will, thank you for joining us. Lots of developments actually in the last hour or so. Faraj al-Shami, who is the father of the terrorist, who reports suggest that he has been praising, on the 7th of October 2023, praised God's men on earth on the 7th of October, talking about Hamas terrorists there. We also read in the Telegraph that the Manchester synagogue terrorist was on police bail for the alleged rape when he carried out the attack. Your thoughts on all of this, Will?
Well, it's not good, Peter. As you can imagine, obviously this kind of information is going to be very inflammatory, certainly with regards to the authorities, certainly with regards to our politicians. And I think the general public, I think, listening into many of the calls that you've been getting, Peter, people are incredibly let down. They feel that they are somewhat helpless in terms of this situation. It's the most horrific incident that happened yesterday. I mean, the last terrorist attack that we had in this country, again, was quite low level in many regards, equally as horrific, but that was back in 2023. So whenever something like this happens, it puts everything else under spotlights, and questions are going to be asked by the general public to say, what are you doing to keep us safe?
Do you, and people just will not believe Keir Starmer and Shabana Mahmood. Now, we know that Jihad al-Shami was not under prevent. He was not known to the security services, but he was known to police. In fact, he was apparently, the Telegraph is reporting, on police bail. What happens now? What's going on behind the scenes in order with the police now in their investigation? They know he perpetrated it. They know he's dead. There have been a couple of other arrests that have been made, and certainly this net will go wider. I would imagine the father may well have a knock on his door as well.
Yeah, I think the father will, and I think his devices are going to probably be secured as well by the authorities. They're going to want to see what he's been doing, who he's been communicating with. I mean, at the moment, the police, certainly when they get involved, Peter, will be as impartial as they possibly can. Nobody is off limits in terms of their investigation and the connectivity potentially to something slightly more organized. The key thing right now will be to see whether Jihad, our attacker of yesterday, was acting on his own volition, whether he was in isolation or whether he was communicating with other people. And I would speculate, and again, this is speculation, Peter, that he was not on his own, and hence why we have other people that have been arrested. What the outcome of those arrests are, whether there are charges made, again, hopefully the authorities will let us know. But at the moment, the general public need reassurance that if you do have someone that is not on the watch list of the security services, of which there are inevitably, there currently is about 25,000 priority targets, which they can't keep monitoring, all of these 24/7. And as is always the way, Peter, as you know, is quite often someone who's lower down the list of priorities or someone who isn't on those list at all that carries out these attacks, which is not very reassuring for the general public.
In terms of the steps that are taken now, there will be so many people worrying. It's a very, very tense time in the country. We've seen those protests last night, more planned tomorrow in London and elsewhere. There's a big vigil on Sunday. I'm going to go to it in central London. We know as well the 7th of October second anniversary is on Tuesday. The next few days could be critical. I just wonder, from your security expertise perspective, how worried the security services and police will be about some form of copycat attack.
I think they're going to be inevitably very worried, and they're going to be watching things very, very carefully. Yom Kippur was always on, the priority list in terms of something potentially happening, because obviously it's such a monumental day for the Jewish community. But as you say, we've got a number of things happening. And something that is not helping, Peter, I would say, is the pro-Palestine, pro-Hamas marches that are going on, because, again, any threat could potentially hide in plain sight. And the concern is obviously the police equally, and I mean, this is a point that's already been made by a number of people, the police that are seconded to actually policing those protests, and they're not peaceful. We saw what happened outside Downing Street in Whitehall yesterday. And how insensitive is that in the wake of an attack which took place only earlier that day? And the police have been diluted and retasked elsewhere.
Will, thank you. Wise words there from Will Geddes, the security expert, joining us here on Talk Drive. Loads more to discuss in the final hour of the programme. Let me know your thoughts on what Will has said as well. And on Sadiq Khan failing to say that the protests shouldn't happen. 0344 499 1000.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good evening, this is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. There's lots to discuss. The aftermath of the Manchester terror attack, the jihad he's called Jihad, and he is a jihadi, the person who is now dead who perpetrated that attack. Turns out his father praised the perpetrators of the 7th of October massacre in Israel. We'll look into that. We'll also look into reports that the terrorist was on police bail for an alleged rape which he carried out when he carried out the attack. That is the Telegraph reporting that he was under investigation over an alleged sexual attack understood to have taken place earlier this year. There's lots of reaction coming your way. There are lots of legal aspects to this. There are lots of human aspects to this as well, especially when it comes to the vigils that are taking place, the fact that the Deputy Prime Minister has been heckled, the fact that on Sunday there's going to be a big vigil in central London, and much like last night and tomorrow in London there are going to be pro-Palestinian protests. Really, guys? Really? Is now the time? Well, Sir Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, has failed to say that he doesn't think those should go ahead. We're going to talk to Sir Ian Duncan-Smith in just a second, the former leader of the Conservative Party, but I want to hear your views as well between now and 7 o'clock. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can also send me a voice note, a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, on those weekend marches, I'll get the view of Sir Ian Duncan-Smith in a second. I want to get the view of Nigel Farage now. He has put out a clip on this. He's talked about this and those marches, those pro-Palestinian marches. We saw a lot of protesting, deeply tasteless, deeply crass last night. And there's more planned tomorrow. This is what Nigel Farage has been saying about it.
There is a big march planned in London this Saturday. And I think the only way we can describe it is a hate march. Whether the Home Secretary and the police decide they've got the powers to stop it, I don't know. What is for certain is we're a country that allows peaceful protest, but we're not a country that allows the celebration of murder or slogans in our street that are deeply insightful. I must admit, saying this now to you today, I feel more worried about the state of broken Britain than I ever have before.
Well, Shabana Mahmood, who is the Home Secretary, she spoke to Times Radio this morning, our colleagues. This is what she said.
We have the right to peaceful protest in this country.
It wasn't peaceful, was it? There were arrests for attacking police.
Yes, and I was just about to say, but anybody who engages in a protest and breaks the law of our land will face the full force of the law. They will be arrested, and I would expect after arrest for the Crown Prosecution Service to do their job as well. I would have wanted to see actually those organisations that are behind these protests to show a little sensitivity and to call off those protests. I think that the behaviour that we've seen last night is fundamentally un-British. I think it's disgraceful, and I would call on everybody who is considering protest in the next day or two to just take a step back and to show some humanity and some love towards a community that is grieving. I think that is the right thing to do. People can get on with their protest. Those issues, unfortunately, are not likely to come to an end in the next day or two. No, the attacker was not known to the security services. We know that he is a British national of Syrian descent. He came to this country as a young child and was naturalised as a British citizen when he was still a minor, but beyond that, there isn't any other information I can share, but he was not known to the counter-terror police. What I would say is it is really imperative that we all stand together, united as a country, and do not allow things that are happening abroad to fuel tensions here at home. It is really important that we're able to reach out to people that belong to different communities and show that spirit of love and solidarity, because we are British citizens first and foremost.
Very interesting that the Home Secretary was very clear in what she was saying to Times Radio there this morning, that the terrorist was not known to counter-terrorism police. But we know since then reports in the Telegraph saying that he was on police bail for an alleged rape when he carried out the attack. We also know that Sir Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, says that the protesters tomorrow should be mindful of the appalling terror attack, but he hasn't told them to stay away. Let's see what Sir Ian Duncan-Smith thinks. He's the former leader of the Conservative Party. Sir Ian, there's so many things to talk about, but let's talk about the protests tomorrow. Should they go ahead? What is your message to people thinking about going on a pro-Palestinian protest tomorrow?
Well, at the very base of anyone's intellect, they should understand that this is a bad time to suddenly come out and flaunt flags at people who are grieving. This has been a terrible terrorist attack, and the reality is that the government needs to make a decision. Shabana Mahmood, I agree with her that they should think about calling it off. More than that, though, I think she and the police should be saying very openly, do not go on this march, and to crack down, if this march goes ahead, categorically on anything that suggests any kind of link to terrorism, terrorist organizations, or the inappropriate chanting. The marches the other night were appalling. They should have been stopped by the police. There were hardly any police, I gather, there when they went in, when they were marching in Manchester. It should have been stopped. And I think tomorrow the Home Secretary and the police should work together and say simply, no, we're not going to allow this to go ahead. On this day, you have a right to march, protest. That's one of the freedoms that we have. But there is, however, a moment when you shouldn't be marching because of what's happening around you, and you need to take consideration of that. So they should say, no, don't go ahead with these marches. I'm told they have the power, but if they don't have the power, then it's time the government gave themselves the power rather quickly to stop marches that are provocative. I've also discovered, which I put out on X earlier today, that 3 days before the government announced out that they were going to recognize a Palestinian state, ISIS put out a jihad call to attack Jews. We're talking about Israelis, we're talking about Jews in places like Britain and other countries in Europe. And it was a direct call to attack Jews in their homeland of Britain or wherever it happens to be. Now, the government must have known about this. So the question I really want to pose tonight to them is, why did you not up the security on synagogues, knowing full well that ISIS, a very serious, nasty bunch of people, were calling out to other people like them to attack? And so who knows what effect that may have had on this individual or others, or whether there'll be more attacks. But they didn't put any extra security on, which they should have done, and the result, I'm afraid, is what we saw the other yesterday evening. So I think it's absolutely important they come clean as to why they didn't put extra security or why they didn't discuss this with the Jewish community at all.
Clearly you think the government have many questions to answer in the security services here. Do you think they share some of the blame for what happened yesterday?
Well, I think given what we know now about this jihadi call from ISIS to attack Jews, murder them if you could, that I think is a serious threat. And I think any sane government would then say, do you know what? We'll help the Jewish community by putting security on, whether it's police or whatever, on synagogues for the foreseeable future until we're certain that that threat may have gone away or dissipated. But right now, there should have been, I think, security on those synagogues, as they were the very clear target, because that's where Jews gather to go to the synagogue, and therefore more likely to be able to attack Jews outright, and that's what happened yesterday.
I want to play another clip now. This is of the Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy at the vigil in Manchester earlier today, and I wonder what your impression is of this, Syrian. Let's see what David Lammy, the Deputy Prime Minister, experienced earlier today.
I have great pleasure in introducing our Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy, and before I do, please, 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 we know how we all feel. We know how we all feel.
On the street. My children's school was closed today. You have allowed this to happen. David Lammy, you have allowed this to happen. You are all guilty. I mean, all you have allowed Jew hatred in Manchester on the street. You have allowed it. You are all guilty. You do not want you speaking here today. You do not speak. You speaking. Shame on you. 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 Shame on you.
Syrian, you have been criticised as a politician, and many times you've been a frontline politician for decades. Do you have sympathy for David Lammy, or do you think that those who were politely and peacefully protesting there actually had a point and were justified in what they did?
Well, first of all, I always think it's important to hear people when they speak. Politicians are all sides of the fence if you can, because we need to get people together to make sure this sort of stuff doesn't happen again. But I can understand the frustration and deep anger for members of the Jewish community, because this was a very specific and direct attack on them. And as I come back to my previous point, you know, why is there not more security on synagogues? I mean, no other place of worship in the United Kingdom has to have security. You tell me who's under threat, who's under attack. It's the Jewish community. I have a Jewish sister-in-law. I tell you now, I know that many in that community are more scared about their lives right now, living in Britain, than they've been at any time in living memory. And that is a terrible travesty for a community that's already suffered beyond belief regarding the Second World War and the Holocaust and everything else. So the idea that this attack should take place on a Jewish synagogue, I think governments have to face up when things like this happen. People want to know why, and more importantly, why was there not more sense about protecting Jewish people when they gather for prayer? That is important.
Is it just about security, or is it about a fundamental change in how Jews are treated in this country? Because I, like you, have seen a huge rise in anti-Semitic attitudes, and not just things that are not just attacks that are reported and so on, but even just it is the racism that is allowed. It is the racism. There are people who I've witnessed, I've heard, I've seen, I've experienced people saying things about Jewish people that they would never say about gay people, about trans people, about women, about black people, but somehow it's okay in some people's minds to say these things. And I just worry whether there is a societal element of this as well as a very clear security element, as you correctly outline.
Yeah, what's happening is the deliberate running together of two issues, and that is to say that you are Jewish, and therefore what Israel does, and whatever your views of Israel, they are a government, they are a separate state, whether you like Israel or not, has nothing to do with how you should treat Jewish people who are going about their daily lives in Britain as British citizens, trying to protect their families and go to the places of prayer, the synagogues, that they have every right to do so, and do so peacefully. And I come back to the point that I made. You're right. There is an increase. There's a huge doubling of anti-Semitic crimes taking place at the moment. And that process is, I'm afraid, what they are getting angry about in the gathering that you just saw the film of. They're angry and upset and worried because they feel like they are being targeted for being Jewish. That should never happen in this country. Never, ever happen. We swore that that would never happen again after the Second World War, that Jewish people should live in peace and be able to go about their daily lives and worship as they see fit. And that is what they're angry about now. And the government needs now to step up and accept that that is happening and start to take action about it. And allowing these marches to go ahead, which is tasteless, frankly, tomorrow. Whatever else, they have the right to march. But tomorrow and last night is just astonishing how crass that really is, with people waving banners and attacking Jewish people. Will be just appalling, and I don't understand why that should be allowed to go ahead.
Thank you, Sir Ian. That's Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, who is the former Conservative Party leader. He's also the Conservative MP for Chinkford and Woodford Green. Phil in Portsmouth says David Lammy has no interest in talking to those people in Manchester. All he was worried about was keeping his probably written for him script dry. I have no sympathy at all. Darrell in Blackburn says, so Sadiq Khan defends the right to protest. This is clearly an unlawful protest, as the supporters of a proscribed terrorist organisation, Palestine Action. Make it make sense. Why on any weekend? Never mind this week. Well, there may be some people there who don't support Palestine Action, but it's a fair point. Dan in Kent says, everyone I speak to feels extremely unsafe and have lost complete faith in the government. I'm telling you, Peter, the riots the other summer will be a teddy bear's picnic if the government don't start opening their eyes. Sue says, good show as always, even after the awfulness of yesterday. Thank you, Sue. I hope the police turn up in full riot gear at the terrorist supporting march this weekend and start policing these marches the same way they did at the UK Patriots. They did a good job yesterday, and the police authorities need not to do their usual and start picking apart the officers' actions. Leslie says Jonathan Sacerdoti is right. We have been too complacent. Manchester Arena, 7-7, Lee Rigby, London Bridge, now yesterday. We have had enough. John in Bury in Lancashire says Stephen Silverman is bang on with his comments, but how do we get this weak administration to take action? We used to be the leaders of the world with a reputation as hard people. Don't mess with the Brits. Look what we have become. Our armed forces must be chomping at the bit to protect our borders and now protect our cities. And Alfie in Lincolnshire says, people don't seem to understand. If these people eradicate the Jews, the Christians will be next. They do not hide their hatred to non-Muslims, says Alfie in Lincolnshire. I want to talk to Daniel in London. Daniel is Jewish. He is a student. Daniel, what are your thoughts today? What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. How are you?
I'm very well, Daniel. It's good to talk to you.
It's good to talk to you. I think, the first thing to say is obviously we're very, very sad about what's happened, but I think even more than sad, personally, I'm really angry because there have been countless Jewish organisations, whether it be student organisations or proper, leadership organisations, who have been ringing the alarm on the rise of anti-Semitism since October 7th. And I feel like a lot of us have been completely ignored to the point where we knew at some point something was going to happen. And so when something did happen, I was sad, but I was more angry.
Yeah. Well, I've spoken to so many people who just aren't really shocked. It is a shocking thing. It is a horrendous thing. But so many people who said, look, this was probably just going to happen, given the atmosphere that is there. You're Jewish. You're a student at a university, Daniel?
Yeah.
And do you, I'm not going to ask you which one because unless you want to say it, you're more than welcome to. Do you feel safe in your lectures? Do you feel safe with people around you? Because we know on so many campuses there is so much anti-Semitism.
Yeah, that's partly why I don't feel comfortable saying which university.
Sure, perfectly understand that, Daniel.
Yeah, just even, talking to my friend about what happened, we were talking loudly, but then as soon as we got into a crowded area, we felt like we had to whisper because we didn't know what other people's reactions would be. We didn't know what people would perceive of us, just even talking about it. And then I think it goes on to these protests, these protests started on October 7th, even while Israelis were still being murdered. Yes, there may be some, people who are genuinely worried about what is going on, in Gaza or in the Middle East, but there are people who have gone to these just to celebrate, the death of Israelis.
Well, look at last night, Daniel. Look at those people last night who were waving their Palestinian flags, who were essentially celebrating the death of Jews. That's what they were doing.
And exactly, and it, it only occurred to me last night, it was the end of Yom Kippur, and to me it felt like a Saturday night because I hadn't been to university and I hadn't been on my phone or anything. So when I saw the news of these Palestine protests, I kind of just waved it off as, it's horrifically bad timing, but, it's a Saturday night, they always do it. But then I realized it's not. It's a Wednesday night. They don't usually occur on, a Thursday night. They don't usually occur on a Thursday night. We also saw the violence in these protests, and it's just scary, how people can be celebrating, the death of us in a country where we've lived for years. As a child, people used to say to me, "Are you going to move to Israel?" And I said no, because I loved the UK growing up. But now it's got to the stage and people don't even say to me, "Are you moving?" They say, "When are you moving?" And I don't really see a future for myself in the UK anymore for safety. If I want safety, I know the only place for me to go really is Israel.
Daniel, that's dreadful. How old are you, mate?
I'm 21.
Okay, you're 21, and you're clearly on a good course. You're clearly at a good university. You're clearly a very articulate, intelligent young man. You're exactly the kind of person that this country needs. We're in the toilet in our economy. We're having all sorts of problems with our workforce that we've talked about it loads of times in this program. Not over the last couple of days because we're obviously focusing on what's happened. But there's so many problems in this country. You are exactly what the future of this country should be. Daniel, you are studying for a degree. I'm not going to ask you what it is or where it is, but I expect it is a hard course to get into at a very good university. That's what I'm pretty sure is going to be the case. You're clearly an articulate man. You've picked up the phone. You're speaking. You're confident enough to speak on a national station, and you're someone who feels victimised in your own country. I just think that is shameful. It is dreadful that you have to feel that way. And even, you're not the only person of your generation who has said to me, about even using the word Israel or talking about what has happened in the last few days, lowering your voice, not saying it loudly, feeling scared, and you know, people trying to make you feel ashamed. It's just awful. What do we do, Daniel? How do we get out of this? How do we persuade people like you that there is a future in this country? I'm not Jewish, and I want to do everything to keep you and people like you in this country, because you've so much to give. You've such a great future ahead of you, Daniel. I can tell, and I want it to be in this country.
Well, thank you for those kind words. I think, first of all, we should also be thanking you, you know, having such a big audience and you know, defending us.
That's very kind of you to say so, Daniel, and I really appreciate that. But I also don't, it's sad that you know, it's really nice of you to do it. I'm not saying, you know, I'm not saying anything bad about it, but people say this to me every now and again, and it's sad that that the people feel it has to be said, because I just, you know, I just want to tell the truth, and I just want to make people feel welcome in this country.
Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't have to be a controversial thing to stand up for the Jewish community.
Totally.
Unfortunately, it has become.
So what's the future, Daniel? What do you think you're going to do?
Well, if it continues like this, I mean, I just don't feel as safe as I used to in the UK. And, you know, every time I do go to Israel is at this point, it's like, even though they're in a war and it's a horrific war, I just end up feeling safer there. But what the UK can do, it's really tough to say. I think it just, you know, we have to show a zero tolerance policy on anti-Semitism. You know, at these marches there have been anti-Semitism, and you know, people on X have been pointing out these anti-Semitic chants, slogans, placards, but the police have been standing there and doing nothing. And so I think it's really brought down the confidence and emboldened. It's brought down the confidence of the Jewish community, and it's emboldened the anti-Semites. So, you know, we can do this. We can. Well,
they know what they can get away with. They know what they can get away with. Daniel, we've got to leave it there, because I really have to go to a break. But I want you to keep in touch. And if there are things that come up on this show, I want you to give me another ring, because I mean, for horrible reasons, I've just been really inspired by you today. And I want to wish you well and for your future, and I want to speak to you again on the show. So thank you for the call today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay, that's Daniel in London there. We're going to continue the conversation. We're going to get more thoughts. Colonel Simon Diggins is standing by, the defence and security analyst, because of course security is a very, very big aspect of all of this. We'll get lots of your thoughts as well between now and 7. Stay with us.
When it comes to immigration, we should be honest that we have imported people into our country over the last 25 years, many of whom are from countries that have, frankly, medieval attitudes. Attitudes towards women and girls, and yes, where it is prevalent, anti-Semitism. And that is wrong. We've got to therefore have a different immigration system that puts the safety of the British public, whether it's British Jews or anyone else, first, second, and last.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Alan, who says this goes deeper than the politicians. It's also the mainstream media who have openly vilified the Jewish community, as the same media pumps out what I call the Shemaima Begum pity me cards. John says, I wholeheartedly agree with Nigel Farage. Yesterday's terrorist act in Manchester and the ensuing celebratory demonstrations from the pro-Palestine mobs across the country were a tipping point for me. Tomorrow could be dreadful for London. We're in deep, deep trouble. Let's find out about that trouble and how deep it is in the estimation of Simon Diggins, Colonel Simon Diggins, former senior army officer, of course, and defence and security analyst. Simon, how big is the security threat as we sit here at the moment at 6:30 on Friday? Because we're in a situation where there are going to be protests tomorrow, vigil on Sunday, services on Sunday as well, but to remember 2 years since the 7th of October terrorist attacks. Also on Tuesday, it is the anniversary of the 7th of October, 2 years on, the exact anniversary. Given what happened last night, given what happened yesterday morning, where are we from a security perspective, Simon? Because there are a lot of our viewers and listeners who are pretty worried.
Peter, good evening. This is a very hard, difficult, and actually very solemn occasion, and trying to work out how we go forward. I've heard a lot of cant from people talking about preserving people's right to free speech and everything like that, when actually what they should be focusing on is the horror of what's happened, what's happened in Britain against a very precious community, and they still want to sit there and make their feeble protests for what's going on. I think security forces will be worried. The police are clearly worried. They are under constraint, and one of the constraints they've got is they've been given this guidance which eventually tells them they need to try and facilitate free and peaceful protests, which is absolutely right and proper. We are a democracy, but like all things to do with freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, there are limitations and there are guidance. And what I find distressing at the moment, because they must be worried sick about how do we protect the Jewish communities who they may not be able to look after properly, and at the same time provide what could be security effective for some protesters or counter-protesters on the ground. And somebody needs to cut that Gordian knot. The Home Secretary, who actually has been speaking in a very robust fashion, but she has got the powers to cut through the whole thing and simply ban these protests. And I think a period of no protests will actually help us then to clear the air a little bit, clear what's going on the ground. And then, if there are other plots planned, anybody else being stupid and foolish enough to try and attempt a copycat killing or a copycat attack, then the security forces, the police particularly, but also other agencies can focus on them. But if they're dealing, if you like, with the noise, which is the noise of protests and counter-protests and everything that's coming from the politicians, that's just making their life unnecessarily hard. And I'm never going to be one who says we must have curtailing freedom of speech or freedom of assembly. It really is not my place. But actually, on occasions, you just have to say we cannot deal with this, and also provide the security required to a very vulnerable community who rightly feel very threatened and very abandoned, I think, by the British state.
I think you're absolutely right in all of that. It's interesting as well with Jihad al-Shami, because he was not on a prevent terror watch list. There's been very interesting reporting from the Telegraph today saying that he apparently was on police bail on an alleged sexual attack. We also have information about his father, who apparently praised the terrorists on the 7th of October, on the day itself. We also have further reporting we've just received here about an eyewitness has claimed, again, this is the Telegraph, claiming that the terrorist shouted, "This is what they get for killing our children," as he tried to get to worshippers. This is an eyewitness called Alan Levy, who helped barricade the doors at Heaton Park Hebrew Congregation Synagogue when Jihad al-Shami was waving a knife. The synagogue's chairman of trustees has told ITV News he saw al-Shami with a big knife, banging his knife into the glass, trying to get through. These stories are emerging as people are worried about the security threat. This will, of course, bring so much admiration for those who sacrificed so much, who risked so much to keep people safe. At the same time, it will worry people, won't it, Simon, who are worried about copycat attacks and further things that may happen?
No, very much so. It's very interesting, the story about the alleged rape and everything goes there. The Israelis have done a lot of research into the motivations of suicide attackers, including failed suicide attackers. In many cases, they're individuals who have been compromised in some way in the eyes of the community. They could be because they have committed some honour crime, they've married somebody or had an affair or whatever, or they've been criminals or low-level criminality. And it's often put to them, this is the way, if you like, to clear the debt which they owe to society from that. Now, I can't say, obviously, that they come directly from the parents, but the fact he's been put in this particular position, his father is, I think, is a surgeon, he may feel himself that the attacker may have felt he had to do something, if you like, to clear his family name and clear the honour. But it's an interesting sort of psychological aspect of the, particularly if they are lone wolf attacks, that the individual motivation is not simply about the ideology, but often sometimes something about themselves and things they've been accused of and things which may bring them down in the eyes of the community. So it'd be interesting to see how that pulls out. Of course, it makes it harder for the police and everybody else because the individual motivation can be very, very complex.
And will all of those thoughts, will all of that analysis, the psychological analysis, the counter-terror analysis, all of that will presumably be being talked about by the authorities at the moment as they try to keep us safe over the next few days?
They're very much so. I mean, it's a question of the resources, all the resources of the state, particularly sort of the agencies, GCHQ, MI5, people like that will be looking to see where the traffic is. You know, where's the noise on the sort of jihadist networks? What are people talking about? What are people excited about? What is it they're trying to do? But trying to find a pattern with that is very difficult because what has happened is the kind of, if you like, the overall sponsor organisations of Islamist terror, people like ISIS or even ISIS-K, who are very, very active at the moment. They've kind of spread, if you like, the kind of the ground seed around the world in terms of horrors, in terms of telling stories which then lead to vulnerable individuals to do terrible things. And because they've not been directly involved in the orchestration of the attack, it's then sometimes quite difficult to lead it backwards to where they were as well. But what they've undoubtedly done is spread the poison in the minds of people who can be radicalised, who can feel themselves vulnerable to such pressures, and then go out and do something terrible as this individual has done.
Simon, thank you. That's Simon Diggins there, Colonel Simon Diggins, the Defence and Security Analyst. Thanks for joining us on Talk. Thanks to so many people who've been in touch. Joan in Wandsworth, who says, I can't understand why people are so shocked. This has been going on for nearly 2 years. The lies in the BBC, she says, the marches every weekend for months that have pulled police from all over London to police these marches, thus leaving nearby London boroughs practically unmanned. The blatant anti-Semitism from so many of these people on these marches, and the hate directed to Jewish people, and Zionism turned into a dirty word, which it is not. It is not becoming more obvious by the day that Jews just don't want a homeland, but that they need one, says Joan in Wandsworth. Carl in Yorkshire says, why cannot one Labour minister say the words Islamic terrorism, gaslighting cowards? Margaret in Birmingham, Shabana Mahmood, you have the authority to stop these protests. Listen to what the British people want. And also, Home Secretary, close the borders now, says Margaret. Sam says Lamy was booed and jeered at a synagogue vigil today. No contrition on his face, no recognition as to why people were heckling him. Just an empty look on his face. Him and the rest of this government are just empty, vacuous vessels. Gary in Bolden says the message by that monster's father said after October the 7th says it all. Our politicians have invited the enemy to our shores, putting everyone at risk. The first rule of government is to protect the citizens. They've failed and should never be allowed to govern again. Penny in Essex says those texts from Al-Shami's father, a surgeon, made someone who's supposed to revere human life. What would he do to a Jewish patient? That is scary. Elle in Shropshire, there's a difference between a peaceful protest, usually against government policy, and a hate march. Pro-Palestinians every weekend, that's become a hate march, and absolutely the Home Secretary along with the police can cancel it, no excuses. They're being very selective with whom they will ban. It's not helpful. Tensions are rising. Catastrophe waiting to happen if this goes ahead. And a final one before the break from Anne, who says, I'm an English lady who's been married to a Muslim for over 40 years. This is quite simple. The anti-Semitism has grown as we have imported more Muslims, many who hate Jewish people more than anything else. We've been disgusted watching what's been growing over the last 10 years, well before the abominable October attack, says Anne. We'll find out what's in the Sun next. I want to take more calls and messages from you between now and 7 o'clock. Kevin O'Sullivan will be here in this studio between 7 and 9, and then it's What Just Happened between 9 and 10. I'm going to be back tomorrow between 10 and 12:30, and on Sunday between 10 and 1. We've got the very interesting Labour MP on tomorrow morning, Joni Reid. She is the chairwoman of the all-party parliamentary group against anti-Semitism, a Labour MP who has stood up for Jewish people. That is very, very rare, all too rare. We'll be talking to her tomorrow, and as I say, with John Lucas, we're going to find out what's in the Sun in just a second.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
John Lucas is the night news editor of The Sun. He's with me here in the studio. Hi, John.
Evening.
There is so much more to report. Of course, so much more information comes out. I know you have a whole team of reporters up in Manchester. Just talk us through how The Sun is going to be covering all this tomorrow.
Yeah, well, we've had a team on the ground since, shortly after this all unfolded yesterday morning, about 9:30, trying to make sense of what actually happened, what the sequence of events were, and who is this chap, Jihad al-Shami, who was behind it and was shot dead, as we all know. So, unfortunately, what we've learnt today, one of the big pieces of news, is that of the two innocent worshippers killed, during this incident. One of them was actually by a police bullet. But the sequence of events is, as we understand it, is that al-Shami has driven his Kia Picanti into the front of the synagogue, and he's hit a man called Melvin Kravitz. He's a 66-year-old man. What we found out about Melvin today is he's a lovely man by all accounts. Neighbours are absolutely devastated. He's just a very well-known guy on his street. Normally he wouldn't actually go to synagogue that early in the morning, so it's absolute tragedy. He was actually there earlier than he normally would have been. Absolute wrong place at the wrong time. After attacking Mr. Kravitz, al-Shami has got out of the car and he's tried to get into the synagogue. Now, we don't know whether he was able to actually attack anybody at that point. What we do know is there are about 40 people there. They managed to barricade themselves inside the building. Now, that has capacity for 900 people, so if he'd have launched this attack a bit later in the day, it could have been, you know, doesn't bear thinking about how much worse it could have been. But all these guys, incredibly brave heroes, a lot of them younger, as we understand it, younger members of the congregation of physically holding the doors, while the older members are standing further back out of the line of fire. Now, you remember this guy had what appeared to be, we know it wasn't a viable device, but what appeared to be bomb strapped to him. So that the bravery of these guys, with just a door separating themselves from him, is incredible. Now, unfortunately, many people have seen the video of al-Shami being fatally shot. What we think may have happened is that he was shot at least once before that, as he's standing by the doors, and we know that one of the chaps, Adrian Dalby, 53-year-old guy standing behind the doors, is actually struck by a bullet.
Yes.
We think other members of the congregation might have been struck by, not sure if it's the same bullet or whether it's shrapnel from that shot. Fortunately, they're recovering in hospital, but unfortunately Adrian, this is a 53-year-old chap, he lived close by, again, very popular man in his community, family all absolutely devastated. We've had tributes from his family today saying, you know, he lost his life in an act of courage to save others. He was a beloved brother, loving uncle to his 4 nieces and nephew, and a cherished cousin. So absolute tragedy there for the family, but you know, extraordinary bravery. He and the others who have done that have saved lives, quite clearly. Beyond that, we are obviously looking at who this chap is. So his family have come from Syria. He was given British citizenship in 2006. We've been to his address and been able to speak to neighbours today, so they're describing him as a sort of unfriendly guy, a bit of an odd guy. From what we understand, he's spent a lot of time in the house, big hobbies, playing computer games, potentially was a heavy cannabis smoker. I mean, this is all stuff we're gathering from the neighbours. Yes. You know, what ends up in the paper tomorrow, I don't know, but heavy cannabis smoker. And yeah, I'd have to say neighbours didn't have a whole lot of good stuff to say about this guy. We think he might have been a father himself. Not quite sure.
There is a picture of him holding a baby, but it's unclear who that baby belongs to. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, is he a lone wolf? Is he, you know, part of a terrorist cell? So they've got to be a bit careful, because we know 2 other men and a woman have been arrested. Yeah. In relation to this incident for a very nearby address, but as far as we know, they're still in custody, being questioned. So we don't know at the moment, you know, whether he was fully acting alone. Whether a lot of the time people are sort of swept up in these things as a precaution. They'll sweep up.
No doubt the father will be interviewed. Yeah. Certainly, he praised the October the 7th terrorists as God's men on earth, and then went on to say that this was a complete shock. Now, the 2 things could both be true, but there will at least be a question as to whether this was a profound shock to Faraj al-Shami.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, journalists, members of the public have been pouring all over his social media. As you say, you know, he has posted a few questionable things on there. and we'll be looking at him as well.
You'll also be looking, I'm sure, at what happens over the next few days, especially the protests tomorrow.
Yeah, well, look, last night was, you say almost unbelievable that these protests went ahead. Particularly, what I'm talking about are the pro-Gaza protests that we had in London.
The railway, and the railway stations. Yeah.
And it was all across Europe, but incredible that it still took place in Manchester. It's just literally miles away from where this happened. And the people on the protest point out, they say, well, look, they're pre-planned. It's not about anti-Semitism. It's about how we believe Israel is conducting the war in Gaza.
I don't believe them, John.
But they've been told that people view this as anti-Semitic. Perhaps many people have said that this could have been an opportunity to show.
Sit that one out.
Sit that one out.
Just watch EastEnders.
Exactly.
Just sit at home.
And the protest plan for this weekend are much bigger. And the Met Police have been imploring the organisers to not go ahead with it. Now, what this group is defend our juries. I think they're branding themselves as. The reason why is because they can't call themselves Palestine Action anymore.
Yes.
But essentially, what they are is it's a campaign group that comes out of the ashes of Palestine Action, which is now a proscribed terror group. And they're saying, they're campaigning, and they're saying that justice system's unfair because they're locking up our members. So the idea is they want to have as many people arrested as possible. And what the police are saying is, well, this is a very tense time. We want to have extra resources at synagogues. We want to have extra resources at mosques. We want to make sure that all of our communities where there might be tensions in London and further afield feel that they're protected. And what you're doing is you're dragging resources away from that with a protest that doesn't actually have to happen, and it is in support of a terrorist group, and that's what Mark Rowley, Met Commissioner, has said.
And we've seen the Mayor of London not saying that they should be called off, which I think speaks volumes as well. John, thank you, as always. That's John Lucas there. He's the night news editor at The Sun. Full coverage tomorrow in The Sun, no doubt. Will be reflecting on my weekend programmes as well. I'm here between 10 and 12:30 tomorrow, and then 10 and 1 on Sunday, and then I'm going to go down to Trafalgar Square for 2 o'clock for that vigil for the 7th of October, 2 years on. Lots to continue to talk about. We'll take more of your calls after the break. Kevin O'Sullivan's coming up at 7 o'clock, but plenty to discuss in the meantime. Stay with us.
Prime Minister right to recognise Palestine?
That's an irrelevant question.
Well, was
it's
he right? Can I ask you, was he right? It isn't an irrelevant question. I'm sorry, John.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry,
you're
John.
out of order. You're out of order.
I am not out of order. It is a perfectly reasonable question. Was he right to recognise Palestine?
It's an irrelevant question.
Do you think it's irrelevant, John? Are you joking?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Justine's been in touch on Twitter and says, listening to your show on Talk, I would like to echo your sentiments about Daniel, the caller we had about half an hour ago. He was articulate, respectful and open, and definitely someone we need for the future of this country. I feel for Daniel, his friends in this community. They don't deserve this. Angie makes a really good point and says, where are the imams here? Why aren't the imams taking a positive step and criticising the vile hatred being spewed out by their believers? I haven't heard any of them do this, but I've seen numerous videos saying death to all infidels. Sandy says, on Talk they've said a woman Labour MP attended a march in solidarity with Jewish people recently. I can't remember her name. She was Joni Reid, and indeed joins me on the programme tomorrow morning. Joni Reid is the chairwoman of the all-party parliamentary group on anti-Semitism. She's put her money where her mouth is, unlike many MPs from many parties, particularly Labour. Another person says, I don't care if you originate from Iran or Iceland. If you commit a serious offence, your citizenship should be revoked and should be sent back to the country of origin. Julian says Starmer's weakness and total absence of any human emotion will ensure attacks against innocent people and innocent British Jews will increase. He'll continue to suck up to and reward terrorists while hanging the innocents out to dry. Mark in Norfolk, it won't be like any previous conflict, but sadly we're about to see what can only be described as a sectarian world war. We find ourselves here because of tolerance and diversification. This government and other parties must now quickly decide which side they are on. Peter says, this person, I recently visited Budapest and there were many openly Jewish people walking around, chatting to holidaymakers, living peaceful lives. Hearing of the treatment of them that's been allowed to fester in this country makes me ashamed to be British. It's really interesting you mentioned that, actually. A very good friend of mine was in Budapest recently, and there's a whole Jewish quarter, and it used to be derogatorily called Judapest, and actually there's now a shop called Judapest. They've reclaimed the name, they've taken it back, and my friend bought me a lovely pair of socks from there which have a beautiful Star of David on them, and I wear them very, very proudly. Simon says no protests will be happening in and around this time, especially after yesterday's and 7 potential copycat events. Pathetic, weak, lame government. David in the Cotswold says Adrian Dolby is an absolute hero. He sacrificed his life to save others. R.I.P. Adrian. And another person says, let's hope the Home Secretary is going to cancel the protest for those weekend late on to avoid potential trouble in between now and then from any potential cancellation. Let's speak to Peter in Dorset. We're pretty tight on time, Peter, but if you could make your point relatively briefly, I'd be very grateful. Good to talk to you this evening.
Good to talk to you. If you see how these politicians are, Lammy and Starmer, and their stony faces and what is going on, and now we've got carnage on the streets and the terrible attack on the synagogue. The situation is everybody's arguing about what they're doing against all the policies everywhere, and all they're doing is disemboweling this country from the inside and out. How our capital is having demonstrations on the streets the way it is, in the most hatred way possible, is unbelievable. And this is, we need to get rid of these people. There is a plot, a plan going on. I'm telling you, if your journalist son presenter with you, and people like himself need to get in and find out what is going on. There is no logic in the way this country is being undermined from the inside out.
Peter, I think a lot of people feel exactly the same way as you, and thank you for your call. I'm sorry it can't be a longer one. I just want to fit in Jenny, who's been waiting patiently. Jenny's from Hampshire, and she is our last call of the programme today. You've got about 1 minute, Jenny. What would you like to say?
I would like to say that I really felt for Daniel, the young chap that you spoke to earlier, and I agree with what your last guest said. I think the trouble is with this government, they're weak and they import terrorists in this country. So there's more to come, and that's all I can say.
It's a dreadful thing, Jenny, but I think you're absolutely right. I just think that we all need to stand shoulder to shoulder with people like Daniel and every other Jew in this country and say, we stand with you, we sympathise with you, and we're not going to put up with any anti-Semitism.
Yep, that's right. I quite agree, 100%.
Okay, Jenny, thanks. Have a lovely weekend. That's Jenny in Hampshire there. Thanks to everybody else who rang and messaged. We couldn't get all your messages on the air today. It's been a really busy show. Tomorrow I am on between 10 o'clock and 12:30. We're going to speak to, as I said, Joni Reid, who is a Labour MP, who is the chairwoman of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Anti-Semitism. She was one of the